Today we've got a crazy story of teaching somebody to grow up by giving them some nuclear revenge. We'll get to that in a bit, but first, my cousin had a habit of destroying stuff whenever she got mad. I smashed her MacBook in retaliation. My cousin is my maternal uncle's daughter. Her dad, my uncle, and her mom wanted a child and waited for 7 years before they finally had her. They tried and failed so many times, but just as they were going to give up, they had my cousin. My mom's family is a closely knit one. She and her siblings were single-handedly raised by their mother, my grandmother. Nana had 4 children. My uncle was her first child and he had 3 sisters, one of whom was my mother. Since our family was closely knit, we got to see one another nearly every holiday. My Nana's children all seemed to have gotten married to people who either didn't care that they spent virtually all the holidays with their spouse's family, or genuinely enjoyed my grandmother's cooking. Holidays were always fun at my grandmother's. The children always had an amazing time together, and so did the adults. There was always a lot of catching up to do, games to play, and so much to eat and drink. When my uncle and his wife had my cousin, I was just 3. She's my Nana's last grandchild and the youngest in the family. Given the circumstances of her birth, everyone loved and pampered my cousin. My uncle was Nana's favorite, so my grandmother transferred the preferential treatment to her. Nana baked her cookies just as she liked them and would always knit the most beautiful clothing items for her. Her aunts also adored her because she was the answer to their collective prayers. Her mom was obsessed with her and she indulged her a lot growing up. Even her bad behavior was tolerated by the adults. I was a child at the time, but I still felt that there was something wrong with how my cousin was raised. My siblings and I discussed it privately many times. She was never held responsible for any error, she never did chores, and she was uncouth and rude to nearly everyone, both children and adults. Since her parents gave her whatever she wanted, we all prayed that she never liked our stuff because, if she did, all she had to do was cry and throw a tantrum. Then we'd be forced by the adults around to just give her whatever it was that she wanted. If she liked a toy she saw with any of us, she cried until one of the adults made us give it to her. She was simply insufferable as a child, and all the other kids in our family did not like her. We avoided her, and the older kids were irritated by her presence. My feelings about her changed as we grew though. I started to like her. She was the closest relative to me in age, and we had so many things in common. For instance, we were both cheerleaders in our respective schools. I was the closest to her in grade 2, and we had a lot of fun whenever we got together during the holidays. Her parents still treated her as the golden child, even though they went on to adopt a boy later on, and she was no longer an only child. She got whatever it was that she wanted from her parents, but her pouting and outbursts were not as obvious as they used to be when she was older. I also never got to see that side of her because we lived apart anyway. We only saw each other on special occasions like weddings, birthdays, and holidays. Still, we stayed in touch, sending emails back and forth. At some point, she started to call me her best friend. We were not just cousins, but close friends. We went to the same university, although I was already in my sophomore year when she came in as a freshman. Before she got into college, her dad had died. It was a sad time for the entire family when her dad died, but it also reduced the quality of their life after he was gone. Her dad did not have life insurance, and he also had debts to clear. So they had to move to a smaller house since they could no longer afford to pay the mortgage. My cousin became a shadow of herself. She was humbled by the situation with her family. We heard later that her mom cut her off. I remember my mom giving an elaborate speech about my late uncle and his wife creating a monster out of their daughter. My cousin and I were still friends in college, but we barely hung out to do anything. She was always busy with her job and schoolwork. When I graduated from college, I got a job in the same town I went to college in. Since my job paid well, I got a decent 2-bedroom for myself. I didn't want to live with anyone, mostly because I wanted my privacy. I lived with different people for 4 years in college and wanted a break from that. One day, my mom called me to ask for a favor. She wanted me to bring my cousin, who was already a senior in college, to move in with me. She had accommodation issues and her mom was not speaking to her. I would have known about her accommodation issues before my mom knew, but my cousin and I stopped being so close in college. She was trying to find her feet, pay her bills, and all that in school. I was more interested in meeting people and making friends. My parents also took care of my tuition, so I only ever worked for the fun of it. I wasn't skeptical about taking my cousin in at all. I didn't even consider it for too long. I told my mom to give her my phone number immediately. She called me later that evening and explained what had happened. When my mom said that she had accommodation issues, I assumed it was a financial issue. I figured my cousin could no longer afford to pay the rent where she lived. My roommates threw me out, she told me, her voice breaking down. I was surprised. Why? What happened? They just never liked me. I was not convinced that her roommates would throw her out just because they didn't like her, so I pressed further. While I was asking these questions, it wasn't that I was going to use them as any sort of metric to see if I could live with her or not. I didn't think for a second that even if she did something wrong to her former roommates, she would do it to me too. She told a long story about how her roommate tried to use the water heater, and how they got into a fight over it and the two tried to hit her. I can't remember what actually happened, but I remember thinking it was too silly to result in such a huge fight. I'm just worried about my safety, she said. You can move in whenever you want, I said to her. I'll clear out the guest room. When I said that, I thought she'd move in after a week or something close to that time frame. Surprisingly, she called me after work the next day to ask for my address. Hours later, she was at my house. While I wanted my privacy and had been happy living alone, I was still excited that my cousin was going to be living with me. Most of my friends from college had graduated and left town anyway. I looked forward to rekindling our friendship. The first red flag was my cousin's story about her former roommates. In all the stories she told about their numerous fights, she was clearly wrong, but somehow she was convinced that she was in the right. Sometimes I'd wondered if she was kidding. I didn't think someone could be that deluded. The day we had our first argument as roommates, I was crocheting a blanket while sitting on my beanbag couch. I'd been working on that blanket for nearly a year. I did it for fun and relaxation purposes. Crocheting and listening to music helped me relax. I was crocheting that day when my cousin came to me and started to rant about one of her professors rejecting an essay she wrote. I know he's only trying to bully me, it's not fair. I knew my cousin could be very unreasonable. She also got very mad and would just keep screaming whenever she was mad. You have to calm down, I said calmly, sitting up on the beanbag chair. You always tell me to calm down, she yelled at me. I was irritated. Oh, you don't want to calm down? Fine, stay hysterical. My cousin charged towards me, and at that minute, I was sure that she was coming to hit me. But she didn't hit me. She yanked my blanket out of my hands, removed the pin, and flung it away. I was shocked, and just as I tried to process what exactly was going on, she started to cry and apologize for her behavior. I think the poor girl is still traumatized by her dad's death, my mom said when I told her what had happened. I just rolled my eyes. Everyone in the family had always made excuses for her. Even my mom, who constantly judged her parents for spoiling her, would often try to prevent my cousin from taking the responsibility for her actions. Since she apologized profusely for her actions, I forgave her and allowed her to keep living in my house. The second time she destroyed stuff was when I made dinner one evening and we argued about her constant refusal to take care of the trash. I did it all the time and I was sick of doing it alone. While we were in the middle of the argument, she flung her plate of food away and it spilled all over the living room. She wasn't quick to apologize like the last time. She walked out and only returned later that night. I can no longer live with her, I told my mom that evening. I agree. When my cousin returned, she bent to clean up the mess she had made. I can no longer live with you, I said to her, wondering if she was going to break something else. I understand, she said quietly and kept cleaning. The next day, I went to work very early and didn't return until later in the night. My cousin came to my room to apologize properly for her behavior. She promised to consider therapy and said she would leave that weekend. I felt bad for her. Her father's death certainly traumatized her. On top of that, her mom had cut her off. She wasn't used to taking out the trash or doing anything at all, and it would take time for her to adjust to that life. I felt sorry for her and told her she could stay. But that cannot repeat itself, I warned. But it will never happen again. I promise you. I talked to a non-profit organization that my friend worked in to see if I could get her an affordable therapist since she couldn't afford to pay for a normal session. She kept postponing and making excuses just so that she won't talk to him. After that incident, she took up an extra job. She had to take the extra job alongside her usual job in school because she needed to buy a computer and wanted to save enough money for a good one. In the 2 months that she was working very hard, she was hardly ever around, so we never had any kind of argument. She soon bought herself a MacBook. Naturally, I was happy for her. She had worked very hard to have been able to afford that. Everything was going well between us until one midnight. I went on a date with my coworker and he took me home. I asked if he wanted to come in for coffee and he accepted my offer. When he came in, we decided to watch a movie together. It was an old movie that we'd both seen, but we wanted to see it together. 3 minutes after I put it on the TV, my cousin came in holding her head. "Can you keep it down?" she screamed and left. I was annoyed. My cousin was very rude, not just to me, but also to my guest. I followed her back to her room and asked why she was being so rude. I wondered why I asked anyway. She was rude to nearly everyone. Somehow she believed everyone had to move things around to make her comfortable. She was living in my house, free of charge, yet she tried many times to boss me around and dictate what goes where. "You always stress me out," she yelled. "You need to learn some manners. You don't just go about ordering people around," I said. She ignored me, so I returned to the living room. My date was already leaving. He didn't want trouble. "I have to get up early anyway," he said. We said goodnight and I returned to the living room. This time, I deliberately increased the volume of the TV. I was already dozing off in front of the TV when a loud noise jolted me back to reality. My cousin had smashed the TV with a club that I'd long forgotten existed. I slowly walked into my room and went straight to bed. I had a presentation at work the next day and I wanted to do it with a clear head. As I dressed up for work in the morning, my cousin came into my room and was saying what sounded like an apology. I didn't care. I didn't even hear her. All I did was imagine the pleasure I'd get from smashing her MacBook soon. I ignored her and hurried off to work. When I returned from work, she wasn't back from her job. The broken TV was still there. I would look at it and laugh. I should have thrown my cousin out the first time she flung my crochet work. When she returned from work, she tried to talk to me again, but I ignored her. I went straight to her purse, picked out the MacBook, and smashed it on the floor. She watched in horror as I smashed her stuff and dared her to do anything about it. As if she was a small child, she threw herself on the floor and cried. I called my mom immediately to let her know what had happened. It was then my mom revealed to me that one of the reasons her mom had cut her off was because she would destroy things if she didn't get her way. Her mom indulged her for too long, but one day she got fed up and threw her out. I will never forget the shock on my cousin's face when I smashed her MacBook. People are always shocked when you mirror their actions. This kind of reminds me of the classic meme of like a news report where it attributes a quote to a man as saying something like, "What are you going to do, slap me?" And the citation says, "Man who was slapped." You run around and be an awful person and break a lot of other people's things. You can't be too darn surprised when they give you the same. That said, our next story is teaching my brother to grow up. Having siblings can be one of the best things to happen to anyone. They're like an extension of you with their own thoughts and feelings, and that's almost magical. At the same time, they can be the absolute worst. Kind of like a shadow of all the bad decisions that you probably will never make because you witnessed them through it. In this thread, I'll be sharing a story about how I taught my thieving older brother a lesson about stealing. My brother and I are what people call Irish twins. Our parents were young hippies when they met, and barely 3 months later they eloped to Vegas to get married because they found out that my mom was already pregnant with me. Barely a month after I was born, my mother got pregnant with my little brother, and 9 months later he was born. Right from birth, they raised us like we were twins, dressing us in similar clothes and gushing over us to people that didn't know us, as if we were actually twins. It also doesn't help that my brother was a much bigger child than I was, so he caught up to me pretty fast. Growing up, my brother and I were close. He was my best friend and confidant. We got into preschool together, and boy did we terrorize the heck out of our teachers. I was the calmer one, the one that lied on our behalf or got us out of trouble. My brother, I'll call him Mikey, was the brawn of the group. He did most of the dirty work, and at a point, it was as if he reveled in getting called out for misbehaving. As we got older, we still always got into mischief together, but I chose safer evils like fart bags on the teacher, or students' seats, and spilling disappearing ink on clothes. These were funny pranks that were basically harmless and would get a few chuckles at most. My brother, on the other hand, liked things that would make your eyes wide with shock. He would do things like unscrew the legs off of our metal desk chairs and watch people fall. Mikey was a good kid, so most of these pranks were done to bullies, mean kids, and people like that. Plus, Mikey was a really big kid by elementary school, and while we were about the same height, he weighed twice as much as I did. It was a nice thing he was doing for the kids, and I supported him. We played basketball, which was a huge sport, and so we were the jocks of the school, and Mikey's whole bully buster thing gave us more popularity points. However, as we got older, my brother started to change. The change didn't fully begin until we had started to transition from middle school to high school. By this time, puberty had set in, and while it remained evident that I would play basketball with my tall, lean frame, my brother got much wider and put on more weight, and the coach told him that he was more a football natural. From there, we started to drift apart as our class and sports schedules clashed. The change bothered me because Mikey had been my only friend all my life, and while he found it easier to make new friends, I was painfully awkward. I was happy for him nevertheless, because he seemed to be thriving. The guys on the football team were jerks. A lot of them were the kids in elementary schools that Mikey and I busted for picking on smaller kids. I didn't like that they were in such close proximity with my brother, but then again, I trusted him to make the right decisions. It turns out I was so wrong to trust him, because he not only started hanging out with the wrong crowd, and soon enough, he began leading them. He was the loudest amongst them all, disrespecting teachers and female students more than anything else. That was the basis of our first fight, and thankfully I was able to pin him down and punch some sense into him, or at least I thought I did. After the conversation and the fight, my brother mellowed down a bit, and I thought our relationship was getting better, until he disappeared for a couple of days. Our parents, like I said, were hippies, and they were barely around us, so they almost had no idea about what was going on in our lives. When my brother returned, I heard some rumors that he started stealing. I didn't want to believe it, but the crowd he kept were notorious for all of these things. They were used to doing these things, and they taught him to do it until he became better than them and basically became their leader. At first, it was small things like candy and small pieces of things like snacks from the corner store. Semi-harmless things. I didn't want to speak about it because I believed that it was a phase that would soon pass. It didn't, because I started to notice him stealing things to and from the house. He got a girlfriend soon, and all I heard in the school hallways was how he got her gifts daily, and they weren't small, inexpensive things either. Expensive clothes, jewelry, and shoes. Soon enough, he was stealing bigger things like whole gaming consoles and people's wallets. I tried to talk to him about it, but he brushed me off and said that he needed the money. We didn't exactly come from a home with a lot of money, but our parents made sure we always had a full fridge, new clothes and shoes when we needed, and a few luxuries like an allowance, video games, and a shed to explore whatever fun crafts we decided on. We had more than most kids we knew, so I didn't understand what more he could need in high school, where he has no responsibilities. I told myself that there was some way to save my brother, and that he wasn't completely lost to the world. I believed it too, until teachers and students alike started pulling me to the corner and expressing their concerns, not just for their brother, but for me as well. Sure, we looked different. He had long hair and looked as if he carried heavy things for a living, while my hair was a little higher than a buzz cut, and I had to bend my head to enter nearly every room I stepped into. But we were brothers, and that meant our facial resemblance was there. I decided to stay out of my brother's life after we had a second fight where I caught him stealing our parents' figurines to sell. This didn't really keep a lot of things, but our mother loved her figurines, and our dad didn't hesitate to gift her one every time. With that, she had built a collection and was very happy with it. I tried to talk him out of it as calmly as possible, but he just got mad and punched me in my face. Of course, he didn't walk away unscathed, but I couldn't believe that he had tried to steal from our parents. That night, I moved out from our shared room and into the attic, making sure that all my things were accounted for and moving around with keys. We didn't have any other interaction until he stole from me. I caught him red-handed in the act. I worked at a tech store, and they'd been teaching me to fix things like phones and laptops. Our basketball coach, who was the one that got me the job, was very supportive, and he handed me his daughter's old laptop to practice fixing it. I had successfully done it over the weekend and was waiting for the next school week so that I could give it back. I used the shed as a workshop and locked it and went away to practice. Mikey had a key, so he opened it, went in, and picked up the laptop. I caught him on my way back from practice in an alleyway. I would have had no idea if the laptop wasn't still packaged in the same yellow plastic bag that I put it in before. I took it back from him in silence, but I was furious and felt betrayed. I knew that I had to do something to teach him a lesson and make him realize the gravity of his actions. Stealing was a little too serious for him to be doing too casually. I decided to take matters into my own hands, and with the help of his football coach and my basketball coach, I set a trap for him. I borrowed my coach's expensive watch and left it in plain sight because I knew that he wouldn't be able to resist stealing it. Sure enough, a few days later, the watch went missing. I waited for my brother to try and sell it, and then I pounced. I posed as the buyer and arranged to meet him in person. When I arrived at the meeting place with about 3 other burly men, I saw my brother waiting there. He was shocked to see me and tried to play it cool, but I could see the guilt written all over his face. I confronted him and asked why he would steal from me, his own brother. He tried giving me excuses, but I wasn't having it. I told him that I was going to teach him a lesson and make sure that he never stole from anyone again. All my friends, which included the coach's brother, a martial arts instructor who had offered to help me with my plan, a high school senior that my brother had stolen from, and his girlfriend's older brother, trapped Mikey in a circle, and they gave him a brutal lesson in self-defense, showing him how it felt to be on the receiving end of a violent attack. My brother was left beat up and bruised in the middle of the street while I went home. A few hours later, I heard him come into the house, and I could swear that I heard him cry. I hoped that he'd learned his lesson, but there was really no way to know because I refused to speak to him for almost 2 weeks after that, until he cornered me in school after practice, and he asked my forgiveness and promised that he realized how much he messed up and would fix things up. In the months that followed, Mikey got a job and started paying back the people he had stolen from. His coach also made him volunteer at a local charity to make up for his past actions. I was proud of him for taking responsibility for his actions and making things right. Our relationship started to mend, and I felt like I had my brother back. Looking back, I know that what I did was extreme and violent. I don't condone violence as a means of solving problems, and I know there are better ways to deal with theft and other crimes. However, at the time, I was consumed by anger and a desire to teach my brother a lesson. I know that what I did was not the right way to handle the situation, and I regret the pain that I caused my brother, but I am glad that things switched around for the better. I just graduated high school and plan to work 1 more year before college, but Mikey had to stay back at class because his grades were so bad. We were going to be getting into our respective colleges at the same time. He had a sports scholarship, just like me, and I was just really proud of him. I think this really just highlights how, when you're growing up, if you get in with a bad crowd, it can really just kind of derail your whole life. Sometimes people need crazy wake-up calls like this, and I'm glad it seems that it worked out. I broke into my ex-boyfriend's house. It's funny how heartbreak can turn you into an actual monster. Some years back, I broke into my ex's house to get back at him for all he did to me while we were dating. I regret it now, but I must admit that doing it all then helped me recover faster. Yes, seeing my ex suffer after taking all his stuff made me very happy. My ex and I have known each other forever. He was my childhood friend's brother, and I was always in their house. I spend most of my time in their house because, aside from the fact that my best friend lived there, I had a huge crush on our cute older brother. I did the silliest things to make him notice and like me. I would stuff my bra and wear my mom's bright red lipstick. He never noticed me though, not until we were in high school. Before then, we exchanged hellos and walked past each other. To him, I was his sister's little friend. Their parents were divorced, and they both lived with their mom, who was a nurse at the time. My best friend hated him because he was unruly and started acting out after their parents' divorce. He was rude to his mom, always got trouble in school, and was unnecessarily mean to his sister too. He blamed his mom for making their dad leave. Never mind the fact that his dad cheated on their mom and she made him leave the house. Even when she said he could come and visit the children whenever he wanted to, he never did. He just abandoned his children and went to a different country with his new girlfriend. My ex and his sister processed this differently. While his sister was mad at their dad and would always express that she never wanted to see him again, my ex, on the other hand, was mad at their mom for making their father leave. He always felt that his mom should have been willing to work things out with his dad. In our junior year, I became a lot prettier than I used to be, and boys started to notice me. My friend's brother was one of those boys. I was his neighbor for a long time, but he never saw me. As soon as my chest got bigger and my face took a better shape, he started lingering whenever he said hello. He would even ask how my day went and say hello to me in the hallway at school. "I hope my brother's not trying to come on to you," my friend said one day when she came into the kitchen and heard her brother and me having small talk. I had gone to the kitchen to grab a bottle of water for my friend and me when her brother came in. I said hi and he asked me if I took French in school. "I have to retake a French class," he added when I gave him a puzzled look. I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Spanish then, right?" I said, "Yes." I knew he wasn't talking to me because of the French class. He just wanted to talk to me. I liked him too, but I wasn't going to encourage him, mostly because he had a girlfriend at the time. My friend came in just before he could say something else. "No," I exclaimed way too fast. "Why would you even think that? He has a girlfriend." "Has that ever stopped any boy you know?" My friend and I laughed. She was talking about her boyfriend whom we just found out had cheated on her. Surprisingly, my friend forgave him and they got back together. As weeks passed, her brother went from just starting random conversations with me to flirting with me. I never flirted back though, even though I wanted to. He had a girlfriend and I didn't want to get in the middle of that. One day, however, we kissed. My friend had gone on a date with her boyfriend, but she said I could stay in her room to finish up an essay. I shared a room with my very loud cousin, so I needed a quiet place to work. When their mom let me in, I saw him look down from the stairs where he was standing. He smiled at me, but I quickly looked away. While I was in her room working on my essay, I heard a knock on the door. I knew it had to be him because my friend wasn't home and their mom was asleep. She would usually just go to bed after returning from her night shift. I answered the door and he came in. I can't remember what we talked about, but we had a conversation and he kissed me. At first, I pushed him away. He apologized and we kept talking, but then he tried again and we kissed. Sneaking around and making out became our thing. I would sneak into their house in the evenings and we would make out. Sometimes he would sneak into my house when nobody was home. Our makeout sessions affected my friendship with his sister since I spent all my free time exchanging saliva with her brother. She even thought I was mad at her. "You've been avoiding me since I went on that picnic with my boyfriend," she said. I said, "No, I've just been very busy, that's all." She said, "Busy? With what?" School and stuff," I replied. I was a bad liar. "We go to the same school," she pointed out. I said, "I know, I've been trying to build up my grades." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't say anything further. One day, I was in the science laboratory in school when I saw my ex walk in with some other guys. They left and it was just the two of us in the lab. I winked at him and he came over. As usual, we started to make out. We were so engrossed in our activities that we didn't notice someone walk in. It was his girlfriend. She saw us and walked away. "Crap," he swore and ran after her. I wasn't ashamed. I was glad she found out about us. I hoped she'd break up with him and then we could finally be together. I smoothed my hair and walked out. I saw him trying to talk to her outside. This is not the first time you'd heard me like this. And with her? I was angered by how she said her, but I was more curious about her comment about it not being the first time he'd cheated on her. I had managed to convince myself that he was only cheating on his girlfriend with me because it was me. That evening, after school, I confronted him about what I'd heard his girlfriend say. She broke up with me, okay? I hope you're happy." I was very sad about what he said. I was even sad because I couldn't tell my best friend about it. I just sneaked back out. That week was the most painful in my teenage years. I was too ashamed to step out of my house. I lost the will to do anything. I didn't even want to see or talk to my best friend. I know I was a crappy friend to her and should have just told her, but I didn't. I wasn't scared that she'd be mad at me for sneaking around with her brother. I was scared that she would judge me for being stupid, for letting myself be his dirty little secret. After that week, just when I was getting over him and coming to terms with the fact that we were no longer together, my mom called out to me one Saturday afternoon. I came downstairs and found him standing by the door with my mom watching us curiously. When I got to him, my mom was still standing by. "Mom," I yelled. She apologized and walked away, but not before giving me a look that said we had a lot to talk about when he leaves. My ex handed me a flower and a letter he had written for me. "I don't know what to say," he said. "I do know what to say, I just don't know how to say it." He was going to leave me to read his letter, but I stopped him and read it out while he watched. His letter basically said he was in love with me and that he was sorry for how things ended between us. I was so young and naive. I took him back immediately and we went back to sneaking around until my best friend found out. She was very disappointed and ended our friendship. To be honest, I didn't feel bad at all at the time. I even felt she was overreacting. It didn't matter to me that she was no longer going to be my friend. As long as I had her brother, I was fine. As though I was being compensated for losing my best friend, I talked about defining our relationship with my ex, and he agreed immediately to be official. That thrilled me because I'd heard stories of how guys never want to lock it down. We kept dating even after he went off to college. We called each other all the time, but we also fought a lot. He would talk about all the cool girls on campus and would get upset if I mentioned that a guy in school had a crush on me. He was very possessive in our relationship, but somehow that made me feel loved. After I graduated high school, I got into college too, but I dropped out of my sophomore year. Thankfully, my parents were supportive. I got an internship opportunity in the town my ex lived in and went to be with him. Living with my ex was tough. Aside from the fact that he cheated on me on different occasions, he was very verbally and emotionally abusive. He would call me stupid and say I was slow at the slightest provocation. Even when his friends were present, especially his female friends, he would make fun of me and tell them I dropped out of college because it was too much work for my brain to handle. I was never happy in that relationship, and it was worse because I didn't even know how a normal relationship worked. I hadn't had a close friend since things ended between his sister and me. He was the first and only experience I had, so I normalized all the bizarre experiences I had with him. Even when he cheated on me, I forgave him and tried very hard to forget about it. After graduation, he got a well-paying job and moved into a bigger apartment. I moved in with him and continued my internship. Things became really bad when one day I returned from work and caught my ex in bed with one of his friends. They were both asleep under the sheets. I felt very insulted because he couldn't even be bothered to hide it. He knew what time I returned from work, and he knew I came home straight after work every day. I quietly left the house and went back to the office. I cried so much that I had a serious migraine for days. For many days, I didn't even let my ex know that I knew what he had done. I didn't want to go through the whole process of him kneeling, begging, and crying, but eventually, I asked him about it. This time, he didn't beg or ask for my forgiveness, he just ignored me. When I asked him if he'd heard me, he just said, "It meant nothing." I felt so helpless because I couldn't leave him, yet I couldn't do anything to make him stop hurting me. He knew I was hopelessly in love with him, and that was why he treated me so badly. My performance at the office became very bad. The personal issues I had were reflected in my work and my attitude. The company had to end my internship abruptly. I was devastated. I knew I had to leave, but I lacked the willpower to do so. Even though my ex was not sober, he still kept being a jerk. I somehow hoped that he would change, that he would suddenly start loving me and treating me right. Sadly, that never happened. Even when I told him that his behavior affected my performance at work, he brushed it off. He went on a work trip once, and I had a full week to stay alone at home. That was when I decided that I was leaving him. I'd already called my cousin who lived in the same town to see if she could let me stay in her apartment for a while. I also called my mom to ask if she would lend me some money for 4 months' rent. When he returned, I was going to tell him that I was done, but I decided to wait till he had settled well. Just as I was getting dinner started, the phone rang. It turned out that my ex didn't go on a work trip, but had gone on some sort of getaway with another woman. The hotel he stayed in called to tell him that they left their makeup bag in the room. I broke up with him that minute and had my cousin help me to pick up my stuff from his apartment. It wasn't my first time breaking up, leaving, and returning, so he didn't move a muscle. He just ignored us. It was while I was in my new apartment, I luckily got one close to my cousin's, and thinking of how empty it was, that I decided to break into my ex's home. I went to his apartment and took nearly all his stuff. Thankfully, he didn't care much for his neighbors, and I was a familiar face in the neighborhood, so no one could have suspected that I was doing anything wrong. I figured he would know it was me since I came in with my key, and so I went to the back window and broke it open with a wooden table. That evening, I saw a post he made on Facebook about his house getting burgled. He even called me to tell me about it weeks later when he tried to get me to come back. I told him I was done. I think it was at that point that he started suspecting that I did it. When he asked me, I flipped and told him to never contact me again. Well, I definitely can't advocate for breaking other people's property, even if they're an awful, multiple serial cheater. But I'll tell you one thing, I'm sure it felt pretty darn good for OP. That said, our next story is, Mom's boyfriend cheated on her, so I sent him to the hospital. Of all the vices that exist in the world today, the one with which I have the most problem is cheating. Why, you ask? Well, because it takes a whole lot to decide to become a cheater. You have to have an insanely high amount of crappy values, some misplaced priorities, and maybe even some psychopathic tendencies. But still, this is one of the more popular vices in the world today. Relationships have ended, marriages have crumbled, and trust has been broken, all because a particular someone couldn't keep it in his pants. I once knew a classmate who got cheated on. We weren't close or anything, but I took it upon myself to teach her ex-boyfriend a lesson. I rammed my knees up his junk and then screamed at the top of my voice that he was trying to touch me. The boy got detention after I bruised his crotch. Why did I just tell you this? Well, for you to just see how far I could go for someone I didn't really know. So, could you imagine the lengths I would go to for someone I actually loved? Like my best friend or younger brother or my mom? Well, you're about to find out, because my mom was also cheated on by her boyfriend, Chris. So I made sure it wouldn't happen again. But before that, let's go into the details of why my mom was dating that jerk Chris in the first place. I don't know a lot about my mom's life. All I knew was from the things I saw. My dad was an abusive jerk who didn't know how to treat women. Whenever they got into an argument, which they did very often, he would get physical with her. I was little then. I didn't really understand what was going on. One time, it got so bad that he hurt her so bad and hit her head on the table counter. When she fainted, he just left her sprawled on the ground and left for God knows where. The crazy thing about my mom was that after an assault like this, she would threaten to leave him, but when he comes back and apologizes, she would forgive him instantly, only for it all to happen again. Fortunately that day, my mom's close friend Rhoda decided to stop for a visit. What she saw shocked her, and she immediately went to work on reviving my mom. As I had said before, I was young, maybe 3 or 4, so I didn't know where to go or what to do to help. As soon as my mom woke up, Rhonda grabbed her phone and reported the issue to the police. That same day, my dad was arrested. After many persuasions from family and friends, my mom finally decided to leave him. She filed the divorce papers, and we moved. Not up to a year after we did, she started dating someone else. It was nice at first because the man, Jim, was sweet and caring. He stayed with her, they talked, and he was even good with me. It went on like that for a few years, and exactly 3 years after they started dating, she got pregnant and gave birth to my younger brother, Cole. Life was good and we were stable. Another year after the birth of Cole, they got married and we were on our way to happily ever after. Only that we didn't quite reach there. 4 years after their marriage, things started to crumble for Jim. He got laid off from work and he spiraled into a life of drinking and gambling away from his savings at a horse track. He blamed my mom for her, in his words, bad luck, and decided that it was all going well for him till we came into his life. He was the one who served my mom divorce papers, and when the procedures were done, we had to move again. During this time, my mom had to move back into her stepdad's house in the suburbs. While she tried to find her feet, the old man was sweet on occasion but grumpy most of the time. He was also nagging my mom and telling her how disappointed he was in her choice of men. This was the main thing they argued over for the 5 years we were there. Eventually, my mom's friend Rhonda got a nice job for my mom in the city, and with the money my mom already had saved up from working as a nurse in a local hospital, she used it to rent an apartment close to her new job in the city. I also enrolled in the high school nearby as a sophomore, and my younger brother was in middle school. Our nice little family was good enough, and we didn't need anyone. I picked my brother up from school and made lunch and dinner sometimes when my mom has to work late. I wasn't complaining really. I knew we all had to put in a token of effort for us to survive. Even my younger brother Cole did the little he could to stay out of trouble. It was all going smoothly until one day I got back from school as usual. Mom was supposed to work late. We ordered pizza. My mom got back around 9:30 p.m., but instead of her to be tired and grumpy, she was in a really lively mood. Weird for someone that just worked a straight 12-hour shift. I just chalked it up to one of those days where she woke up on the right side of the bed. But that didn't stop there. The next few days were the same. At this point, I had to ask questions. She was being really dodgy with her answer, so I didn't push. That weekend, as I woke up to make breakfast, that was the only day my mom gets to sleep in, so I took that responsibility. But as soon as I got to the kitchen, Mom was already there, but she wasn't making breakfast. She was talking to someone on the phone. That wasn't what stood out to me. What made all my alarm bells start going off was the fact that she was giggling like a high school cheerleader. What the heck? I had a basic idea of what was happening, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I waited patiently while making breakfast for her to hang up, so we can have a discussion about who she was talking to. 30 minutes later, she hung up and stared at me with starry eyes. My God, she was in love. I asked her what was going on, and as usual, she said nothing. But this time I pushed till she confessed that she met a guy in the hospital where she was working. He brought in his friend who was being attended to, and they kinda hit it off. He didn't collect her number that same day, but he came back the next day just to do that. His name was Chris, and after the 30-minute rundown my mom gave me about him, I decided that he sounded really nice. He had just asked my mom out to dinner, and she was really excited about it. After breakfast that morning, Cole went over to his friend's house while I went with my mom to get her a new dress for her date. Their date was set for Friday night and he came to pick her up. That was the first time I met him. He looked really nice and I was just glad my mom had found someone that makes her happy. She came back home later that night and she was practically on planet 7. She told me all the things they talked about, all his smooth lines and even the jokes he made. The next few days, my mom began to smile more and laugh more. She even had that glow that people had when they're like, satisfied in life or something. A few weeks later, they formally announced that they were dating, and I couldn't be happier. Everything was working well, and the workload became more bearable because Chris was always coming over to help out. He and Cole got along really well because they both liked video games and movies, and it helps that he was a really good cook. Most of the time, Cole and I would come back home to some freshly baked pie or cheeseburgers already set on the dining table. 3 months into their relationship, my mom announced that they were moving in together. Now, I loved the idea of having Chris around, but I had my reservations. To be honest, I felt like my mom was kind of rushing things because she had been alone for so long, and she hadn't taken the time to fully get to know Chris. Besides, having him stay with us is just going to add another mouth to feed because, as far as I knew, Chris didn't have a stable job. He was an artist that sold paintings once in a blue moon, and he also had an upstart band whose music isn't very good. We had a discussion about it, but when Mom started to get all defensive about her intentions for wanting to have him around, I decided that, okay, sure, whatever you want to do. The next day, Chris moved in with us. They both sat us down and we had a talk about the new living arrangement. Chris gave us a heartfelt speech on how he loved our mom and how that was the only reason why he wanted to move in with us. I had no problems with the arrangement whatsoever. I had told my mom what I thought, and since she explained that it was okay, it was fine with me. The next few weeks of having Chris with us were nice. I didn't have to wake up early on Saturday mornings anymore, and for me, that was a big win. Once again, I thought this was going to be our happily ever after, but once again, I was dead wrong. One Wednesday morning, Mom had a call from work. The nurse that was supposed to take the evening shift got into an accident and she couldn't make her shift. They wanted Mom to cover it. She was used to this, so it wasn't new, but it kind of ruined her mood because she was looking forward to getting back early from work and crawling into bed to sleep. Anyways, as usual, Chris was gonna stay home and watch over us when we get back. During the early minutes of lunch break, me and a friend of mine, Luke, were arguing about an assignment we were given the day before. And so I walked back over to my locker to grab my book to show him something. To my utmost shock, I realized that I left the notebook at home on my reading table. It was bad because the teacher was a stickler. He wouldn't want to hear that I forgot the assignment at home. He might even give me detention. There was only one thing to do. I had to sneak out of school, hurry home, grab my assignment, and sneak back in. Easy enough. I took my friend's bike and cycled home. I stepped into the living room and immediately knew that something was wrong. I wasn't psychic or anything. I saw a lady's purse on one of the couches in the living room. It wasn't Mom's. Mom doesn't own many fancy purses. I wanted to call out to Chris, but I didn't. Something was not right. So I headed straight for my mom's room, and there I found him with someone who isn't my mom. The lady was tied to the bedpost, and they were right in the middle of some weird stuff. My mouth fell open, and I immediately started to feel nauseous. My first instinct was to scream and maybe attempt to pry Chris's eyes out, but I decided otherwise. They were so deep into what they were doing that they didn't notice me open the door behind them. I quickly pulled out my phone and took a 7-second video before tiptoeing out of the room and closing the door behind me. I ended up forgetting to take the assignment, my whole reason for going home. For the rest of the day, I couldn't think of anything else. All I could wonder is why he cheated on my mom. She had been nothing but sweet, caring, and loving to him since he started to live with us. All I knew was that he was going to pay, and I was the one that would make him pay. That evening at dinner, I didn't talk to anyone. I stayed silent all through, eating my food while I thought about how to get to him. I got my perfect plan a few minutes after I lay on my bed to sleep. I knew Chris was allergic to sesame, and that was how I was going to mess with him. That Saturday, Chris went out to some art convention while my mom had a morning shift in the hospital. She was supposed to come home to cook dinner, but I told her not to worry about it. I was gonna cook. I prepared pasta with tomato sauce, but instead of using olive oil for the sauce, I treated it for some sesame oil. My mom got back home just as I set the table, and Chris followed shortly after. We all settled down to eat like the loving family we were. After taking some spoons of the pasta, Chris began to cough. He drank some water to clear his throat, but it didn't work. He eventually collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. He wasn't in a critical condition or anything because we got to the hospital early, and also my mom knew the right things to do. When he was stable, the nurses allowed us to see him. Because Mom was in the room, I apologized to him, pretending not to know about his allergies. After a moment, she went out of the room to receive a call. I sent Cole to the vending machine to get some snacks to eat. When he left, I walked up to Chris and told him that the sesame oil wasn't a mistake. Before he could say anything, I pulled out my phone and showed him the video I took. His eyes went wide with shock and he started to stutter, trying to explain. I shut him up and told him that the next attack would be more fatal if he didn't break up with my mom and leave our home. He promptly agreed to leave, and I walked back to my seat before my mom got back. The next day after he got back home, he packed his bags and left without even giving an explanation. My mom is still pretty sad about it, but in time, she'll get over him. See, in this situation, wouldn't it be better just to tell your mom the reason and the things you saw and maybe even the recording you took? I wonder why it's better to OP to just have it end without ever clarifying. Like, I could understand if they don't want to be held liable for intentionally landing them in the hospital, but they should have told Chris, tell my mom exactly why you're cheating too. Don't leave the mom totally in the blue, she's gonna think it's something she did or something. My friend became my boss and messed up. As a woman who was born disabled, life had never really been easy. I was born with Erb's palsy, where complications before my birth caused muscles and nerves in my right hand to be weak and unresponsive. As an adult, I was born with a relatively smaller and way weaker right hand. My parents had done all they could to have my arm fixed, and they quite honestly spent a lot of money, but the best result we got was me not needing to amputate the arm. I had use of my arm, it just was very limited use. I couldn't hold things for long or use it intensively. Sure, that affected my quality of living, but it wasn't so bad. I wasn't in a lot of pain, and since I grew up using my left hand as my dominant hand, it rarely affected me gravely. The biggest issue for me was getting picked on. Before elementary school, I mostly got asked questions about what was wrong with my arm. From elementary school, though, the snide comments started coming in. Funny enough, most of the comments I got at first came not from my classmates but from their parents. The first time I actually had an experience with discrimination, it was when the mother of one of my classmates walked up to me while I waited for my dad to pick me up. She sat down beside me and started to ask me questions about my hands. She asked if I could use my left hand well and if my defect was contagious. As the child I was, I didn't see anything wrong with the questions she was asking at first. I happily told her what my parents had told me to tell anyone who asked about my arm, that I was born a little different, but that I was just like everyone else. I proceeded to show her the painting I'd made of my family in class that day. When she started to ask about my parents, though, I started to feel a little concerned. She asked if my parents also had the defect, so I politely told her that I didn't want to talk to her anymore, and I walked away. A few minutes after that, my dad came to pick me up. By that time, though, I'd mostly forgotten about the incident. It wasn't until we were seated at the table for dinner that I remembered and told my parents about what had happened. I could swear I've never seen my mom so mad before. She was absolutely outraged and insisted on calling the principal to report what had happened immediately. The principal had assured her that there was no place for discrimination of any type in the school, and had also said that he was going to personally talk to the parent in question. I assumed that that was all there was to it, until my parents got home one day from a PTA meeting looking very pissed. My mom got on the phone with a lawyer, while my dad took me into my room to ask me a few questions. At first, he asked if anyone had spoken rudely or mockingly to me, especially my classmate whose mother had harassed me. I told him no. He asked if people treated me differently or refused to talk to me. Sensing what was going on, instead of answering his question, I asked if this was because of my hand. He sighed and said it was. Apparently the same woman who had harassed me had spoken up at the PTA meeting, saying she didn't feel it was safe for her child to be in the same class as a cripple, and that my parents moved me to a different school. I would later hear that it took my dad and 2 other parents to keep my mom from pouncing on her and beating her butt. However, it didn't really end well. The woman had called my parents and me all sorts of slurs, and she had keyed my dad's car as she was being escorted out of the school premises. My mom was so upset, she had insisted on going legal, and there was nothing my dad could do to dissuade her. Eventually, my classmate's mom was sued by my parents, but after losing her job due to the public storm that my dad stirred up, he knew a few people in the media, she issued a public apology and my parents dropped the lawsuit. After that, I still received discrimination, but it was never ever from my classmate or their parents. One thing I've always been proud of is my academic performance at school. From the get-go, I'd always excelled academically, and it was something I was very proud of. My parents were also quite proud of my academic excellence, and so they supported me heavily. As I grew older, I started getting involved in a lot of extracurricular stuff too. I was part of the chess club, and I even headed it in my senior year of high school. I was also on my school's debate team and a part of the drama club. In all these things, my parents were very supportive, and where they could help, they did. I did get a fair bit of discrimination here and there though, but I never let it get in my way. I graduated as valedictorian from high school with scholarship offers from some of the top universities in the US. I chose to study robotics at MIT though. I'd always wanted to go to MIT. It was while I was a student at MIT that I met Theodore. Ted was also a student at MIT. He had big dreams of one day owning one of the world's most successful tech companies. In fact, when we first started talking, he spoke about it non-stop. To be honest, at the time, I had hoped to date him. He was brilliant, funny, and made a really mean spaghetti and meatballs. With time though, I realized that we just couldn't be together. For one, he seemed to be uninterested in me romantically. He only addressed me as a friend, and I took the hint. If he were interested though, it wouldn't have made a difference. We simply weren't compatible. Our views on life were just different, and I soon realized that there was no way we'd ever work out. Regardless of that, we became very good friends, and over the years, we built a very strong bond. When we graduated, Ted's dad, who was quite rich, invested in Ted's dream. Ted started to build a robotics company. From the start, he let me know that he wanted me to work with him. Of course, I agreed to that. He was not only my good friend, but we'd worked together on quite a few projects at MIT, and we worked really well together. I got brought in as the chief technical officer based on my knowledge and skill regarding robotics. Sure, I didn't have a ton of experience, but I learned fast, and my dedication was an asset. It also helped that in university, I had started developing a pretty advanced and efficient way to develop robots that were extremely precise, yet powerful. As a matter of fact, with this system, I had developed a robotic ram that could autonomously do anything from picking up a sheet of paper from a glass table to arm wrestling at different power levels without absolutely destroying the arm of its opponent. Together, Ted and I built a range of products for businesses. As we succeeded, more investors were drawn towards us. We quickly scaled up the company and tried to diversify. It was really epic. Over the next 5 years, I felt as fulfilled as I possibly could. Things started to change when one day Ted came into my office to watch me work. Now, that wasn't odd by itself, but the fact that he spent hours there just staring at me made me start to feel uncomfortable. I told him he was starting to spook me, and then he apologized. He said he wanted to talk to me after office hours though, so we arranged a meeting at a restaurant for dinner after work. At dinner, Ted told me that he was attracted to me and he was wondering if we could date. I was quite flattered, but at the same time confused. I had liked Ted in the past, but that was more infatuation than anything else. There was also the fact that we worked together, or to be more accurate, I worked for him. There was no way that wasn't unprofessional. And even if there wasn't that, there was the big fact that I felt nothing but friendship for Ted. Like I said before, we were quite different in our views about the world in a way that was quite deal-breaking for me. However, wanting to let him down softly, I told him I was happy he decided to talk to me about it, but I didn't see him as anything other than a friend. I apologized if I'd let him on in any way, and I told him this didn't affect our friendship in any way. He was quiet for the rest of the evening, and even when I started conversations with him, he gave bland, monosyllabic answers. I understood that he must be feeling bad, so after a while I kept quiet too. After dinner, he paid and simply left. I didn't even know he had gone. I had gone to use the bathroom and came out to see that he simply wasn't there. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer. My texts went unanswered too. The next day, I saw Ted at work and tried to talk to him, but he said he was busy and didn't have time to chat, so I went to my office. I was in the middle of work when he walked in and said he wanted to talk to me, but after work. He left immediately after, and I honestly couldn't read his face to determine what type of mood he was in. Perhaps he wanted to apologize for ditching me at the restaurant? Perhaps he wanted to try his luck again? Perhaps I was about to get fired? Thoughts rushed through my mind, each worse than the last. By the close of work, I was a nervous mess. I waited for quite a bit for Ted. In fact, I was quite certain we were the only two people left in the building when he finally walked in. The look on his face was one I had never seen on him. He looked absolutely furious. He asked me what right I had to reject him like I did the previous night. He said he knew I liked them when we met, and he had after all these years decided to pity me and return the affection, and I dare reject him after all he had done for me? I tried to tell him that there were a lot of reasons we couldn't be together, primarily our incompatibility, but that only seemed to make him angrier. Frothing at the mouth, he said he could almost get any woman he wanted, that there were so many people who would beg to date him, and he certainly could do more than a cripple. That instant was where something in me snapped. All my life, I had had to deal with people who mocked me because of my arm. but I never had someone as close to me as Ted address me like that. I wanted to cry, but at the same time I wanted to tackle him and pummel his face. However, I did something much wiser. I stood up tall, looked him right in the eye, and with as much venom as I could muster, I told him to move out of the way. As I walked out, I heard him mutter, "Betty, wait." I didn't look back. The tears didn't come till I got home. When they came hot and steady. I cried myself to sleep. I woke up with a new resolve to deal with Ted. He was not going to get away with what he called me. I called in sick and missed a couple of days of work. I refused to pick any of Ted's calls up or read any of his messages. When I resumed work, I started with my plan. I was leaving the company, but I was going to burn it on my way out. I had already applied to a few other companies I knew would love to have me work with them. Then, day by day, I slowly started to erase every work I put in. I cleared out coding, took blueprints, and even tampered with prototypes my team and I had built. I made my exit as grand as I could by dropping my resignation letter at Ted's desk on the day we were supposed to pitch our latest robot to our biggest investor. At the bottom it was signed, "Your favorite cripple." I was sure with the code that was now missing, the robot couldn't function as it was. I walked out of the office, went to the airport, and took my booked flight to Seychelles. When I returned, all heck had broken loose. Many of the company's investors were pulling out, and employees were resigning and moving to other competitors. I had a bunch of mail from Ted, some begging me to come back, some cursing and threatening. He had also dropped notes at my apartment. One of them was written in blood and said, "I will end you." I saved them all to leverage if he ever considered going legal. As the weeks went on, I continued to observe the company crash and burn. Heck, even Ted's dad was considering pulling out. I, on the other hand, got a job with one of the country's top robotic companies. Right before I moved to start my new job, I sent a bouquet of flowers to Theodore with a note that read, "There won't be a next time to your stupidity. If you're wise, you'll learn how to take rejections. Oh, and if you as much as think of coming for me, I'll make you as distressed as your crumbling company." I didn't need to sign it. He'd know who it was from. It's been 3 years and I haven't heard from him. Good. Honestly, if I was an OP situation, I think I would have gone at least mildly legal about this. And as soon as I got a letter written in blood saying, "I will end you," that's an immediate report to the police and a restraining order. Like, how do you downplay that or just be like, I'll just file this for later just in case. That said, our next story is Broken Promises from My Father. My parents' love story was supposed to be the best love story I have ever heard about, but life got in the way. Or should I say my father got in the way. My parents met and fell in love at Orange County Community College, Middletown campus, New York. My mother described the moment as instant and scintillating. Nothing looked fishy. Was it supposed to? I mean, my father, Mr. Bakar, a young East African immigrant in search of a greener pasture in America, was everything a woman could tag as a man crush forever. To top it off, he knew how to do this romance thing the way K-drama actors portrayed romance. He was everything and more, except that he never loved my mother the way she hoped he did. And my father would go on to ignite deep hatred and trauma in my mother and me. This trauma was the result of all the broken promises made to my mother in their 5 years of marriage. The same broken promises that made me question my identity and would later set me on the path of revenge I never knew I needed. I grew up with low self-esteem because my childhood wasn't sugar and spice. I had to live with quite a number of relatives as a child. Let's focus on my granny. I lived with my maternal grandmother in Los Angeles, California until I was 16. She was the first human that made me know that some individuals will never be good enough for some people, no matter how hard they try. It was strictly appalling with her. I had to pay for the disobedience of my mother. Yes, my mother did not have the support to date my father. We can't fathom why Granny had a special hatred for black men, but we knew she did. Although she took pride in her whiteness, she wasn't a racist. History has it that she once dated a black man who didn't take care of her heart. Thus, her vow was to not allow anyone from her family to go out with any black man again. Well, my mom was different. As far as she was concerned, my granny's history should stay with her and should not be transcended to her children. My mother loved my father, and that was on period. Maybe my mother shouldn't have loved my father. Perhaps I would have found favor and love in the sight of my granny, the way my cousins found favor and love in her sight. As far as I can remember, most of my granny's grandchildren craved her indulgence. I was seen as different because my father wasn't loved or even present. Black men were not endorsed by my granny because they evoked unpleasant memories, and my father was not any different. I didn't know much about him, but I was old enough to know that he was not welcome. My granny didn't talk about her failed black love, but her demeanor each time a talk revolved around it showed that she would be forever resenting the man that caused her pain. There were times I wished my mother listened to my granny in regard to her love life. Maybe I would have experienced the love she dished out to my cousins. I couldn't say she hated me, but I knew I wasn't foremost on her love list. Something about me triggered her. I bring her memories she didn't want to live with, but she couldn't undo what my mother had done. She referred to my mother's disobedience as a mistake so much that I began to believe that I was a mistake. So if she had any love to spare for me, it was after she had loved up on our other grandchildren. She was the type that loved and loved so much, and she was equally the type that hated with a special grace. Yes, she had grace for everything, including love and hatred. She was resolute, firm, and industrious. She was bossy and carried around her an air of importance. I don't know how she saw herself, but she always felt the world revolved around her. Why wouldn't she? She had chains of businesses around Los Angeles, and she was heavily invested in oil and gas. She had money, a name, and even fame. Oh, did I not mention that her beloved husband, Mr. Gregg, my grandfather, adored her? He was her personal handbag as they were closely knitted, except that Mr. Gregg was the quiet version of my granny. He was less seen and less pompous, even though he was not a poor man. Oh, my Gregg, my granddada, he was a good man. He was the reason why I didn't die of the low self-esteem my granny worked hard to instill in me. He was my real G. I remember when Granny took my cousins to Africa to visit one of its beautiful islands. It was my grandfather that kept my head at bay. He made sure I had a good vacation with my aunt in Asia that summer as well. I can talk about the Maldives because Greg was kind enough to secure that all-expense-paid trip for me. That trip was going to be a major game changer for me. Asia changed me, or should I say my Aunt Melissa, who lived and worked in the Maldives, painted hidden pictures of me I never knew existed. She grew up with my mother and they attended the same college. She knew my father, but she wouldn't tell me anything about him. As she took me from one island to another, she gave a straight face and a mean look anytime a conversation revolved around my father. On the day we visited Mail Island in the Maldives, I wondered if my father took my mother on a honeymoon when they got married. I wondered why he left, and why my mother made a stern resolve to never allow me to speak to him or even see him. It hurt badly. The world is beautiful, but I wondered why only a fraction of the world's population truly experiences its beauty. My life was not beautiful, even though I was on a beautiful island. After my vacation with Auntie Melissa, I didn't go back to my granny. I was preparing for college, so I had a chance to spend time with my mother in New York. I had only been in New York when I was a kid, and all I have of the city are faint memories. When I got older, I was not only intrigued by the commercial drive of the city, I was awed by its congestion and attractiveness. When I learned that different places are representations of different things, I couldn't hide my daze. For instance, Broadway is linked with theater, 7th Avenue is linked with fashion, and Harlem is the representation of the African American dream. Then there was my mother, who I wondered what she represented in my life. I had spent a huge part of my growing years learning about my mother from afar. When her marriage with my father went south, she stayed back in New York and she left me at the mercy of my granny. I couldn't really place what I felt for my mother, but I knew it wasn't love, at least not at the time. I didn't like that she left me with Granny. I wanted us to stay together. I wanted to know her and touch her. Even though I had questions, lots of them, and when I had the opportunity to ask those questions, all I did was stare. My mother stood right in front of me after so many years, and I was not only transfixed, I was in awe. I couldn't believe that my mother had been aging backward. There was no ounce of aging at all on her. She was still as stunning and beautiful as ever. She had all these, and she was still without a man. Settling down with my mother in New York wasn't a piece of cake. On most days, we were like strangers to each other. Although we've spent years away from each other, I expected our relationship to be better than it was. Not that my behavior around her was any better either. And then I realized that all the trauma I had buried within me was beginning to surface. How I was called the B word, meaning child born out of wedlock in Los Angeles, and how I got treated like one. Nothing else had hurt as much as the unwillingness of my extended family members to accept me. It wasn't my intention to date Joshua, one of the boys I got close to in New York, but I dated him anyway. Looking back now, I was never meant to have dated him, but he accepted me and I felt that was enough. Even though he was toxic and reminded me of all my traumas, I stayed with him regardless. I wasn't supposed to, but my self-esteem made me do it. I had believed all of the lies people around me told me over the years, and I had a poor image of myself. On the eve of my 17th birthday, Joshua organized a surprise get-together for me. I was surrounded by all the amazing young people I had met in New York. It was supposed to be a spectacular night until everything went south. Joshua lived on drugs, and he got easily triggered by seemingly trivial things. I couldn't believe Joshua would rave madly because another boy danced with me on the dance floor. As much as he was supposed to be very mad, not to the extent of hitting me in the presence of everybody, I didn't know the extent of his anger and his unfounded jealousy until I woke up in the hospital. My mother was by my bedside weeping profusely. I drifted back and forth into sleep. I wondered what was wrong until I tried to move my body, but was unable to. I cried. My body shook heavily as I did. My mother could only sob while she watched me. When we both found our voices, she held my hand and gave me a grave look. I avoided her gaze. I didn't like that look. I asked her again for the umpteenth time where my father was. I didn't expect her to yield to my request, and I was grateful she did. When I met your father, I wasn't expecting myself to fall in love, nor was I looking for love, but he came with his sweet charm to sweep me off my feet. I thought our love was pristine and would never have a blemish, so I went ahead to get married to him, even though we were young college students. Despite that pain that I felt in my body, I brazened up to listen to more as my mother made her epic narration. My mother continued, "Even though my mother and my siblings were against our relationship and then marriage, I was undeterred. I loved your father with everything. I loved his skin, his shiny sparkling teeth with his dental diastema were just as perfect as his smile. Oh my days, did I mention that he was just as cerebral as he was humorous? Despite that, your father was hyper-organized. He was equally fun to be with. And then he loved me, or so I thought. We got married and he was granted express entry into American citizenry. I honestly had no reason to be sad or suspicious about our marriage, as your father gave me no reason to. As far as I was concerned, we were young and in love. Then, something strange happened during the 5th and last year of our marriage. I saw a message on his phone from his wife in Kenya. Wife? I didn't think much of it because there was no possibility in heck that Bakar had used me to get his papers. He made lofty promises to me. He promised to protect me and our love. He said he loved you. After disobeying everyone, including my mother, to marry him, I didn't expect him to have such a huge secret that he kept away from me. I interrupted my mother as she spoke. I didn't believe he loved me because how could a father not look back for so many years after divorcing his wife? He left me to go through life alone. I'm his daughter. Yet he didn't protect me against Granny and all the cousins that called me a child born out of wedlock for so many years. If he wanted me, he would have looked back no matter what. Well, after much scrutiny and investigation, I had to accept the bitter pill your father served me. It was difficult to accept that I was the ladder for Bakar to climb to his American dream. I had spent years wondering if your father could have lived a lie with me. I wondered what he felt when he said he loved me and couldn't wait to watch you grow. Even though I couldn't face my mother, your granny, I had to keep you in Los Angeles after the divorce. I was too broken to allow you to stay around me. Years have passed and I'm just as broken. I didn't know what to say. When I didn't know about my father, I didn't hate him. But when my mother stopped at her last sentence, I made a resolve not to think highly of him again. My mother couldn't trust another man after my father. Not that I was any better. I was low self-esteemed, traumatized, and an angry bird. When I finally finished college, my father reached out. I was marrying the love of my life after college, after quite a number of therapy sessions, and my father suddenly wanted to be a part of our lives. I thought he was a selfish man who only cared about the interests of his family in Kenya. The family he eventually moved to the States. How appalling. I hated his guts. I hated how he hurt my mother and me. How could he use us as bait? How? He could have cheaply looked for a contract marriage instead of involving emotions in his quest for a better life. Unfortunately, life wasn't kind to him. He didn't realize his American dream because his Kenyan wife realized her selfish ambition through him. I heard he was a poor and miserable man. Not that I wanted that for him, but I didn't care much about him. And the perfect revenge for me was to keep him shut out of my life the way my mother shut him away from hers. After all his pleas and his obvious outbursts of emotions laden with regret, my mother and I didn't budge. I didn't want him to be a part of my wedding, and by extension my life, even though he wished to be a part of it. As far as I was concerned, a man that couldn't keep his promises when things were rosy would not keep his promises when things were not. Yeah, considering this guy's track record, I'm sure almost to a certainty that he's popping up because he wants to milk some kind of new asset. It's just maybe unclear what that is. If they really wanted a relationship with you, they had all of your life to try to do that before that point. Definitely far too little and far too late. Why I didn't forgive my sister's fiancé. At first, I didn't like that I was going to have a baby sister. I had enjoyed all the love and affection my parents could spare for 5 years, and I didn't want that to change. I didn't want to share my parents with anyone, not even a sister. Hilariously, the 5-year-old me felt I could control who gets added to our family or not. Well, you can call me selfish and spoiled, but I loved my life as an only child until the precious little girl was dropped into my arms on a windy Tuesday morning. She was called Carmen. On that day, I felt betrayed by my emotions because I didn't throw her away as I thought I would. Instead, my heart melted completely like cotton candy. I didn't even know I needed a sister until I had one. She filled our home with light, love, and laughter. She wasn't just a girl, she was the perfect addition we never knew we needed. All of that was never meant to change until Carmen met Craig. Craig would go on to bring out a wild venom I never knew existed inside of me. Before we got older and eager to leave home, Carmen and I were what people called the perfect bond. Even though I was pretty much older, we were both almost inseparable. I could conveniently give my parents a huge credit for fostering love and unity between my sister and me. I loved how my mom had lectured and guided me to love, accept, and protect my sister no matter what. I loved my mom a lot. My father called her Lizzie. I used to think that Lizzie was one of those who God ordained to raise cool kids. She was an excellent mother. I remember how I worried so much that I wouldn't be a good sister to Carmen. My mother didn't tell me I would. She simply said, "Goodness is not what we struggled to show. It's what we allow to show through us." I was 8, but I understood deep things because I grew up with deep folks. Just like my mother said, I allowed the goodness in me to shine through to my sister. I can't forget the picture. That particular memory of our childhood days ignites in my heart. It was winter and I was startled by the thick layer of snow that covered both the driveway and sidewalks of our home. Carmen was 4 and I was 9. Apparently she was startled but equally fascinated at the sight of such a gigantic figure outside our home. Covered in innocent ecstasy, she took to her heels and dashed into the scary ice that could melt a mountain. I was startled. Despite my deep allergy to colds, I didn't think twice before I dashed right after Carmen. I knew I could get hospitalized, but I cared less. I just wanted to get my sister out of harm's way. We had no winter jackets or winter boots. Rather, we were like bare fishes on a block of ice. Neither of us had hoped to be right inside the snow 10 minutes before we stepped out. A few minutes into what seemed like forever, the unexpected happened. Carmen's tiny toes and legs were stuck in a block of snow, and in an instant, she was frozen. Her chirping laughter and her energy began to sink in a jiffy. Apparently, she realized that what she was experiencing was far more than a joke. All the while, I was still trying to catch up with Carmen, and when I finally did, I was astonished by the level of cold that oozed out of her once warm body. She was shivering and was turning white at the same time. I struggled with her stuck legs and her extremely cold body. She was quiet, apparently in great shock, but I was frightened. I called for my mother amid the confusion, and by that time, I was already shivering too. By the time I was able to release her stuck legs, I was shivering badly and she was unusually still. For the first time, I realized that neither my mom nor dad would always be around to save my sister and me. It took me 20 minutes to realize that my parents had sprung to swift action when they realized our situation. Carmen and I lay on my king-sized bed, carefully tucked in heavy blankets, even though the heater was on. My mother was frantic as she paced back and forth in the room, and my dad simply gazed at the two little girls he had sacrificed so much for. My dad was fondly called Noah by his friends. He was a good man in every sense. And if I felt every man should treat me humanely and like a lady, it was because of how my father treated all the women in his life. He was love, and love was him. My father had led us into so many adventures in his life. He was spontaneous and at the same time gingerly. I loved everything about him, especially his gusto. But what I didn't understand was how he managed to combine simplicity with discipline. He was simple, but also a disciplinarian. He had a vision for our family, and he knew how to strike a balance while he builds that vision. On the day Carmen and I had the snow experience, he didn't spare the chance to tell us to steer clear of any act that could put us in harm's way. That day, I equally renewed my resolve to protect Carmen, always and always. And then, in a blink of an eye, Carmen and I were no longer walking through the snow unprotected. We were young adults making real-life decisions. Trust me, I tried my best to be a good big sister that Carmen could emulate, and just like my mother did to me, I tried to not choke her with my protective instincts. I knew early on that I can't control everything in life, and the fact that I couldn't control who Carmen dated was a feeling that was going to haunt me for a long time. Craig is his name, and I'm sure I've met the love of my life, Michelle. Those were my sister's words to me. I hadn't met Craig, so I formed no opinion about him, but it was pretty obvious that Carmen was obsessed. Both of us had agreed to bring Craig to our parents during the holidays, and I gladly looked forward to the rays of sunshine that would radiate in our home on that day. That was Carmen's first serious relationship, and I loved the glint in her eyes when she raved about him in our room at college. To be honest, I wasn't keen on having a romantic relationship myself, but I tried not to dissuade my sister from finding happiness with Craig. Earlier that year, I was in a relationship with a boy called Samuel. He was Sam for short. Gosh, talk about the devil, and you talk about Sam. I don't know why it took me a while to realize that he was a thorn in my side. The memory of him nauseates me and makes me very anxious. The first time I knew what it meant to gaslight, it was because I was with Sam. He never owns up to his wrongs, rather, he looks for a way to evade them. Once, I told him I wasn't comfortable with the relationship he had with a girl named Tessa. Tessa was almost always with him when I was not. Even though I expected him to adjust, all he could say was, "You mean I should be a loner because I'm with you, Michelle?" I watched tears trickle down my puffy cheeks, and all I could think about was how my dad treated all the women in his life, including me. Right there, I knew I would be letting my dad down by settling for Sam. Then there was Carmen, who raved lavishly about Craig. Under my breath, I prayed earnestly that my baby Carmen was in the right hands. As much as I tried to feel right about Craig, I never did. I tried to write off my own feelings, but I knew I wasn't comfortable with his large eyes, stout body, and sharp-witted personality. Something about him triggered me. But then, Craig wasn't about me. When we had dinner in our family home in Plymouth, the table was round and perfect. My mother was particularly keen on being a good host, always. She had carefully prepared grilled Cajun spiced chicken breasts loaded with avocados, cheese, and spinach. The aroma was nothing compared to the taste that melted in our throats. It was heavenly. Craig smiled from ear to ear as he generously complimented my mother's cooking. Well, not that Carmen and I were surprised at what my mother was capable of pulling off in the kitchen. We were always treated to amazing recipes since we knew what food was. After the meal, my parents had a chit-chat with Craig, and it was shocking to hear that he wants to marry Carmen as soon as possible. We were astonished at their plans. We hoped that Carmen would finish college before slipping into a man's arms forever. Although Carmen was excited, I wasn't comfortable with the plans. When she made it known that she was moving in with Craig, I was further taken aback. I couldn't grasp what was happening, and I knew that Carmen was no longer the baby girl I fell in love with. It was hard to believe they had such plans together. I was hurt, and much more than that, I was very uncomfortable. I had to own up to my parents about my feelings. Yeah, I've heard a lot about the adrenaline that love can ignite. Its mushy feelings, the desire, the rush of emotions, and what have you. I wasn't even naive about all these feelings. All I wanted Carmen to do was to get to know Craig more. The day Carmen moved out of our college apartment, I was quick to tell her how unnecessary the whole move was. I didn't support the marriage either. I had to spill it out just the way I felt. Just give it time, Carmen, give it time. Carmen told me she understood how I felt at that time. She told me no one's going to come between us. She assured me that she was always going to be my little sister. She was only taking an adult decision and not a life sentence. I cried. I cried because I knew there was nothing my parents and I could do to stop Carmen. As she grew older, she had a right to pursue her happiness, and we can't always protect her the way we love to. Just like I expected, I saw less of Carmen since she moved in with Craig. Although we were in the same college, we seldom bumped into each other. It looked unreasonable, but I felt Carmen avoided me. I invited her over for dinner just so we could catch up with Craig, but I got dozens of excuses not to come. At that point, my parents were equally worried. They mandated me to find their last daughter and be sure she was fine. Then, the unexpected happened. I shivered as I taxied my way down to the hospital where my sister was admitted. I was the only one in the dark about how Craig had repeatedly hurt Carmen since she moved in with him. Then, the last one he did, Carmen was sent into a coma. I didn't know what to tell my parents. When I got to the hospital, I almost drowned in my tears. I couldn't believe the girl we'd protected all our lives was thrown into a vegetative state by a man. In that instance, I knew I wouldn't stop until Craig pays for all the things he did to Carmen. First, I needed to save my sister. I prayed fervently by her bedside. By that time, my parents were notified about the very drama we all feared in the past. It wasn't easy, but I was able to calm their nerves. After 2 days, Carmen came around and I couldn't be happier. I was finally able to breathe an air of relief. She was all teary and remorseful. She apologized for letting our family down. At that point, all I wanted to do was thoroughly deal with Craig, even though he already got arrested by the police. While he claimed it was an accident, I knew most of Carmen's friends couldn't have lied about how violent he was with Carmen. Even though he was all remorseful and apologetic, I cared less. He could have used that energy to protect my sister instead of bashing her. If only Craig knew that our family is a closely knitted one, he wouldn't have messed with Carmen. As usual, he thought he would get away with a despicable act as such. Each time I remember when Carmen was in a coma, I got into a state of frenzy. Craig was athletic and agile. He was popular on the basketball court as much as he was popular in the classroom. Craig was that guy. Looking back now, I didn't know what attracted Carmen to him, his physique or aura, but what I knew was that the very thing which attracted Carmen to Craig was going to be the end of him. I liked the way he garnered fans on the basketball court. Craig was both competitive and fierce. I needed no soothsayer to tell me how important sports were to him. Just when his interest in basketball was about to take a major leap in college, I showed up with an unexpected nemesis. I couldn't risk forgiveness because Craig didn't deserve it. He dumped Carmen after the incident, and I'd never seen my sister so broken and clueless. Craig would never forget the morning before a very important basketball trial at the University of South Carolina. I reached out to his coach to show all the brutal evidence of the violence that Craig committed against Carmen. As I watched Tom, Craig's coach, I didn't know what broke him the most: the terrible pictures of different evidence of violence, or the video of heavy punches that sent Carmen into a state of coma. Tom was not only disappointed but also disgusted by such inhumane behavior. He worried for Craig. I knew he would never be cool with Craig again, but I didn't know that he would oust him from the team. As if that wasn't enough, after much deliberations and meetings between Tom and the college officials, Craig was suspended from the school's basketball team. As I watched my family bond so deeply in love and togetherness during the next summer holidays Carmen and I had in my parents' house in Plymouth, I knew our family would never again be torn apart by any man. I don't even know if this really constitutes nuclear revenge. I think this is just the right thing to do in that circumstance as far as ratting him out. It's just sad to see somebody who came from such a loving and supportive foundational household fall victim to somebody this abusive and try to save their face. There's definitely zero blame to place upon her being in a situation like that and having a natural reaction to hide it or not mention it, but it really does highlight how somebody can have an amazing support system and still ball up and hide these horrendous things. This next story is teaching my coworker some manners. Working a 9 to 5 is something I never really saw myself doing in my entire life. I'd always liked the idea of working from home because my father did, and it made his relationship with our family really strong, as opposed to my friends who had parents that went to work every day besides the weekends but didn't spend enough time without them. My father loved to hang out with my mom, my sister, and I. He always took us on these family trips and let us miss school once a month. He was a good father until he lost his job and became really distant from us. The job had started replacing their older staff with young millennials, and my father had just reached his 50s. It was a sad time for my family because while I just finished high school and was working 2 jobs in my gap year to make enough money for college, my mom had given birth to twins. My dad let himself wallow in the sadness, but instead of getting up to find another job, he just stayed down. After a year, his personal savings had started to run out, so he decided that it would be a good time to find a job. After a couple of months of job hunting while doing the odd job here and there, my dad got a job in construction. It was already a pretty hands-on job, and he let himself get lost in it, completely changing from the affectionate person we knew to someone who couldn't stay home for too long. It made me feel a little guilty, especially seeing as my mother wanted to join the workforce again as well. So I took an extra gap year to be more available in the twins' lives. When I did get into college, I transferred to a community college that was a 30-minute drive from my parents' home and used the rest of my savings to get myself a car. I was more present in my sister's lives in college, but once I graduated, I moved away to LA with my best friend from high school and did freelancing work on Upwork and Fiverr for a year. It was probably the hardest year of my life because getting jobs was hard, and I was pretty new to the freelancing life. My best friend worked in the entertainment industry as a talent manager, and she had access to a lot of parties and events. Despite being a massive introvert, I let her talk me into going to all of these parties because I believed that my chances at getting a more stable job would be increased. It definitely worked because I ran into the head of a video game animation company that I'd been a fan of for so many years, and we had a drunken and lengthy conversation that led him to give me his card and insist we had a meeting. We did have the meeting, and it was then that I heard that he had been needing a storyboard artist but hadn't seen anyone who specialized in it. To be clear, I majored in fine art and media studies in college, so while I was well versed in a lot of art styles, I wanted to focus more on traditional art. I didn't think I could get the job initially because I wasn't exactly a storyboard artist. Sure, I'd done some storyboarding in the past year, but not enough that I could say I did it professionally. I didn't let my inexperience get the best of me, and I freeballed an entire presentation to explain to this hotshot gaming CEO on why I was the best for his brand. It took some convincing and a test project for me to get the job, but I did get it. The best part of it were the benefits, the pay, and the fact that I didn't have to go into work more than 3 times a week for the first 3 months. After that, it was reduced to once a week. I'd worked with the company for about 7 months, and my best friend and I were in the middle of getting a bigger apartment together when the pandemic hit. I was thrust into a loop pretty quickly when lockdown restrictions became strict. Because we knew we were going to be stuck at home, my boss decided that we needed to work on churning out new game ideas as the hours passed. As the storyboard artist, I had to do all of the first stages of bringing the game to life, and it was basically a 20-hour job. I was working around the clock like that for a year, only having time to eat and sleep a few hours. While I made more money than I ever had, it messed with my sleep schedule and my overall quality of life. I added a lot of weight, my dark circles became worse, and I consumed so much coffee that I got serious withdrawals when I tried to quit it. By mid-2021, I had gotten enough and needed something healthier. As if by fate or sheer luck, my boss decided that he'd gotten enough of the gaming company and he sold it out. The new owners seemed like a bunch of incels that wanted all of their fantasies brought to life in a video game. They had the money to pay for it, but I decided that I wouldn't be part of such a community. Immediately, my boss announces that he was selling off the company. I started looking for another job. This time, my portfolio was more stacked, and I got a job, also as a storyboard artist with another multifaceted media company. They did everything, and it excited me that I would gain even more experience. Another thing that stood out to me was the fact that I had to go into the office 4 days a week with paid overtime. Before the pandemic, I was just an introvert, and choosing not to go out was my decision to make. With the pandemic, I had nowhere to go. My best friend went to stay with her family, and I had to get a cat because my anxiety was through the roof. I decided that going back into a social working space and physically having coworkers would help me a lot. The few weeks between when I quit my old job and started the new one, I used to build a routine. I started working out and working on reducing my dependence on coffee and energy drinks, eating actual food and not just pizza bread, and just doing things that made me feel healthier. By the time my first day of work rolled around, I was pretty excited. And the last time I remembered being that excited was on my first day of middle school. Upon reaching my workplace, the first thing I noticed was how white the place was. Everyone either had long blonde hair, looked young enough to be in high school, had colored hair, or was an odd combination of all 3 things. They were all overly happy, spoke to me like they were animatronic, and giggled a lot. Before I go on, I think I should mention that I'm a Black American man. I'm pretty dark-skinned, 6'2", a little heavier set, and I just started letting my afro grow out. You can imagine how out of place I felt being the darkest person I could see. Now that I think about it, maybe it was just my newfound social anxiety that overthought a lot of the hostile behavior I saw, but I was pretty uncomfortable for a while and didn't warm up to anyone until nearly a whole month of working there. In that month, while I didn't manage to make any friends, I may have made an enemy. How, you may ask? I have no idea. Because of the capacity of work, the company had 2 storyboard artists, me and a guy that I'll call Brad. He was a typical Brad with rich parents who paid for him to go to art school and unidentified mommy and daddy issues. Before I realized that he was all shades of insane, I wanted to be friends with my fellow storyboard artist. His art style was very different from mine, and it was good. While I made good use of my sketches for everything, all of his art was clean, barely any sketching or rough lines. I wanted to make my work cleaner, so I attempted to joke about being jealous of his work. The very next day, I got a warning that someone had reported that he felt threatened by me because I was being too aggressive. It didn't take a game of Pictionary for me to know who did it, and while honestly I was upset, I had not been aggressive in any way. The microaggression hurt, but thankfully I was moved up to a different office, and I made friends with 3 women that looked like high schoolers but were in fact all older than me. We got along pretty well and even became friends outside of the work scene. I made more acquaintances in other departments, and soon I settled into a nice little workflow. I had no idea about this at first, but apparently Brad was head over heels with one of the 3 girls. Let's call her Zia. She was an Egyptian who had grown up in London, and the only other black person in our department besides me. Even then, she was still pretty light-skinned. Due to obvious reasons, Zia and I were closer than everyone else, and we called each other work besties. Brad had been in love with Zia from the moment she started working there, which was over a year ago. I had no idea, and neither did Zia. Brad must have thought that I had a thing with the girl he liked, and his aggression towards me reduced. He shared slightly racist, funny memes in the work group chat, didn't inform me about a few projects that we were supposed to work on together, and found a new way to attempt to make life a living heck for me. I didn't notice a lot of his attempts because things started to get really rocky financially at home, and I had to take care of my entire family for over 3 months because the twins fell ill, and it took all of my parents' savings to pay off the medical bills. But once things had cleared up for me, I started noticing things missing in my office. Sometimes it was a document that I'd already printed and needed to send in. Sometimes it was a whole file. I brushed it all off to just being scatterbrained from the difficult couple of months I'd been having. The day my personal sketchbook went missing was the day I clocked that maybe my brain wasn't broken, and someone was playing tricks on me. I had no idea who stole my sketchbook until a new game idea was being pitched into boardroom, and it was something I had been roughly working on for a different client. I was beyond livid, but I couldn't do or say anything because it was technically wrong of me to accept work from another client. I could see Brad beaming as he was given all the praise for the game idea, and I decided that maybe I needed to teach him a lesson. I first needed proof, so I attached small cameras to record the office after hours. For the first week, there was nothing unusual, but by Wednesday of the second week, Brad returned my sketchbook, attempted to open up my laptop, and when he couldn't, he screamed profanities and racial slurs at my desk. Yes, including the N-word. As if that was not enough damage for the day, he walked over to Zia's desk and pleasured himself all over it, wiping himself with a pack of her wipes and throwing them in the trash. I left the tape in for a month so that I could extract a lot of footage. So during that month, I made sure to hang out more with Zia. Of course, she was in on the plan. My best friend had invites and extra tickets to high-end parties and concerts, and Zia and the girls were always my plus ones. Zia and I would take slightly intimate-looking pictures and post them for him to see, and it was fun. Along the line, fiction became reality, and Zia and I kissed and realized that we liked each other. It was around this time that I also removed the tape from the cameras in the office. I didn't watch them to the end, I just decided that I would play it all in front of the staff. It was embarrassing to say the least. Brad turned a brighter shade of red by the second, and by the time the video was finished, he resembled a too ripe tomato. He was asked if he had anything to say for himself, and all he said was that I was dating Zia and it was against the code of conduct. It wasn't, and he got fired immediately. I, on the other hand, got a promotion almost instantly, and Zia asked me to be her boyfriend. Nearly a year later, and things are still going pretty well for me. Zia and I have moved in together, while Brad now works with the incels from my last job. Guess he found the perfect job for himself. I mean, to be honest, considering what OP did here, I'm surprised OP didn't get any kind of reprimanding or get in any kind of trouble themselves. I mean, they posted unauthorized cameras in the workplace and recorded it for a month. Yeah, they caught some monstrosities going on, but I don't think you walk out of that with a promotion necessarily. Also, I'm surprised that upon finding out exactly what this guy did, you didn't call it off right away because, doesn't Zia have to go back to work and somehow face working at that desk that he did, to around on? Definitely a lot going on in this story. I took revenge on the bully. I'm an 11-year-old from a middle-class family of 5. I attend QYA middle school and I'm in grade 6. However, there's this 12-year-old kid in grade 7 who's the #1 bully of the school, but goes unpunished every time he commits an atrocity because he's from a wealthy family and mainly because his parents are the prominent donors to the school. I dislike him because he gloats too much. He's too full of himself. Every teacher, including the school's principal, looked the other way whenever the atrocities of W were reported. My dislike for him began when he bullied one of my close friends to hand over his lunch, but my friend disagreed and I supported the decision. The moment the bully W saw that my friend was not ready to surrender his lunch, like every one of the kids in grade 6 like us would, he was highly enraged. Because of his rage, he pushed him to the floor and began hurting him. I wanted to take him off my friend, but his minions didn't let me. I kept screaming and shouting, "Get off my friend, you're hurting him!" But all my words fell on deaf ears. When I saw that commanding him to get off was not going to work, I began to plead for him to leave my friend. He did listen, but rather than let us be, he passed the aggression to me and began to beat me up for shouting and disturbing his eardrum. The onlookers in the cafeteria could do nothing but watch. However, one of my classmates ran as fast as his legs could carry him to the principal's office. Immediately, Mr. J, the principal, heard about the fight. He left his desk and went straight to the cafeteria, only to behold a bloody scene where my friend was on the floor, writhing in pain, while I was being battered terribly by W. The principal separated the fight as soon as he recovered from the shock he felt the minute he entered the cafeteria. I was beyond delighted to see the principal because I thought he would surely take my side after seeing the damage done by W. But to my disappointment, Principal J just scolded W by word of mouth. I was shocked because I expected the principal to take the proper measures, like suspending him for fighting with his fellow student. After the incident, I discovered why the school's management did not adequately scold him. I found out that Mr. J, the principal, was W's maternal uncle. I was so furious with the level Mr. J stooped to in his path of injustice. W avoided my friend and me for a week after the incident, but the moment he sensed that the previous matter had died down, he began his assault. But this time, his assault was twice what it was before the incident because he knew that no teacher or management could take the necessary step to curb his bold attitude. Some days after, my friend and I decided to eat our homemade lunch in the class rather than at the cafeteria. Though eating in the class was prohibited, we felt that if we ate in class, W and his minions wouldn't look for us in a bid to have our respective lunch boxes. After about 2 or 3 minutes of moving to the end of the classroom to evade the prying eyes of W, we began eating our food like fugitives that had not had anything to eat in 6 days. Unknown to us, one of his minions came to the classroom, saw us eating in the school, took a picture of us and went to show it to the principal, who called our name from the PAS, public address system. We were both caught off guard because we felt that no one saw us. We knew we had been found out when we got to Principal J's office and saw our homeroom teacher. We were given a 1-week detention for flaunting the rules and regulations of the school. Another painful thing W did to me was he locked me in the locker. According to him, locking me in the vault would teach my friend and me not to go against him and his minions again. Instead, we would be very obedient. I had to keep banging on the door of the locker I was in the moment I began to hear voices outside. I kept hitting the door because my life depended on it. About 3 minutes, I think, the entrance to the locker was opened by a junior student who heard disruptions and decided to find out the cause of the noise. I was so happy for the temporary freedom because I knew that W still had a lot of bullying up his sleeves. As if locking me in the locker was not enough, W decided to pull a hard one on me during PE class. Before our PE teacher entered the class, W grabbed my friend and me and pulled down our shorts, exposing our underwear. Before we could pull our shorts up, he took a picture of us and posted it to the school website. What a public shame that was. I was stupefied that I broke into tears with what he did because I didn't expect him to go such lengths to try and disgrace me. I was so afraid of checking the school website when I returned to the confines of my room because I didn't know what to expect. Nonetheless, I found the courage and checked the website. What I saw was so shaming that I decided there and then that I was never going back to the school. But my parents thought otherwise but promised to come over to my school. I was on my way to school the next day, even after a lot of my protesting. On getting to school, I saw my friend who was as gloomy as I was, and immediately guessed that he also did not want to come to school with the amount of humiliation we received from W and his minions. Throughout the day, my friend and I got many disapproving stares, while some were full of pity. I was so tired of being the object of attention of the school in a disgraceful way, but thanks to W, I can't evade it. He was always finding ways to make my friend and me the object of laughter and mockery. That same day, my parents came as promised and told the principal of the latest development. But to my astonishment, the principal pretended and lied that he had no clue of such. With his denial that there was no such thing on the school website, my parents could no longer pursue the matter. Instead, they could only implore him to focus more on the happenings in the school rather than leaving most of it to the teachers. When my parents left the school, W came to me and threatened to take more degrading pictures of me any chance he got and post them on the school website as he did earlier if I did not stop telling my parents of his bullying. He said that if he were to beat me to death, no one would question him because he gives the rules and not the other way around. As he made his point known, he left my presence, but his threats did not go with him. I wondered if he was 12 years old and not 21 years old because the threats felt like they were spoken by someone much older than I am by 7 to 10 years. After my parents' visit to the school died, W came up with another way to piss me off, eating my lunch and my friends behind our backs. They bullied my friend and me, beating us, eating our lunches, playing pranks on us, and sometimes making us get detention for his crimes by framing us as the villain. There were times he would steal something valuable from the table of our homeroom teacher and any teacher and frame us as the culprit so we could get detention. Still, there was a day he stole something from the principal and, as usual, left it in our locker. My friend and I thought we would only get detention as we've been getting them before, but unfortunately, we got a month of community service. This pain infuriated me to the point that I could not take the hardship anymore. I could not tell my parents what was happening to me in school because of the threat W gave me the last time my parents came to the school. I had to suffer everything in silence. I was getting frequent detention, which was of great concern to my parents because I was never the one to cause trouble. However, the moment I got the community service sentence for stealing the property of my principal, they knew something was amiss. But I begged them fervently that they should please not go to my school, at least for now, to lay any complaint. During the cause of my community service, W and his minions would occasionally come and mock me. Sometimes they would come to take pictures of me in the uniform for community service given to me by the school management. I know you're probably thinking of the whereabouts of my friend. We were both separated because they didn't want us to devise and commit another crime bigger than they could handle. The harassment from W and his loyal minions continued until I finished my community service. The harassment and prank from W and his gang of loyal friends did not stop. Instead, it went higher. This time, they gave my friend breathing space and their entire focus was on me. They would double-cross me in the neighborhood after school hours and ask for mundane things. And if I refused to produce them, they would beat me up into a pulp. Most of the time, I'm rescued by a passerby and sent to a hospital for immediate medical care. Due to the constant beating and stress, I suffered massive internal bleeding, swollen eyes, and broken ribs, among other injuries. Anytime my parent was in the hospital to see me, they would be so mad at me for not telling them about the bullying sooner. For instance, my dad mentioned laying complaints to the principal of the school and the police so that the right thing would be done. With my condition, I pled that they would take no such step because they would be exposing me more, and I thank God that they reasoned with me and promised not to take any action yet. A few weeks later, after immense treatment under the eagle eyes of my parents, nurses, and doctors, I was back on my feet. Even after my discharge from the hospital, my parents, especially my mom, made me stay an extra week for adequate bed rest. During my bed rest period, I had a heart-to-heart talk with my parents. And I also promised them that I would do my utmost best to stay away from W, his minions, and the trouble he was always carrying with him every time. They made me promise to open up to my principal about everything that happened. I did as I promised my parents. I told the principal everything, but just as I imagined, He claimed everything I said was my way of defaming his nephew because of jealousy and envy. He told me never to return to his office for such an unimportant thing. When I saw that no matter how much I reported his excesses to the school authorities, they would take no step, I decided to take the laws into my own hands. I had decided to take revenge on W for all his misconduct, and there was no going back. Because I wanted my revenge plan to be executed neatly, I withheld the information from everyone and anyone, including my close friends from school. The first step to my revenge expedition was to learn more ways of pranking someone for my bad-to-the-bone paternal cousin during our summer break. I learned a lot of moves from her, and even if I were to execute them, I was sure not to be suspected. My first prank was to flip his backpack inside out, transfer the contents back into the bag, and tightly tie some zip ties together. I love this particular prank because for him to open his backpack, he'll have to cut the zip tie. To make this prank effectively piss W off, I did it towards the end of class, when he would have no choice but to carry the backpack home in its inside-out form before cutting the zip ties. The moment he stepped out with his inside-out backpack, he was laughed at by most of the students, even though they were terrified of his reaction. Well, I can't blame them for how they laughed at him. He was just so full of himself. He was so ashamed that he ran straight to his car with his head bent and tail between his legs. I was thrilled to have seen him so embarrassed and out of place. W didn't come to school for the rest of the week because he could not face the mocking stares of every student in QIA middle school. After giving W a taste of his medicine, I decided to up my game because I knew that W's bullying of me would begin in a day or two. I then told my mom always to pack me 2 lunches. I had to lie to her that it was for my close friend. Meanwhile, it was for W. This time around, I laid the bait for W. As usual, he would come for our lunch, forcefully, and I got extremely sick of it. I then told my mom to add hot spice to one of the lunches, and she helped me with it. Fast forward to school's lunch period, I pretended to be excited about eating my lunch, and just as expected, W came to our side of the table, snatched my lunch, and immediately popped it into his mouth. The reaction he gave after he ate it was priceless. W practically exploded in pain, writhing around the floor because he couldn't handle the heat, but I wasn't done with him yet. I calmly looked at him and told him that drinking a nice glass of cold water would help him reduce the heat immensely. And just as expected of someone in pain, he did what I said. However, when he took the chilled water as I advised, the pain magnified 100 times the former heat. Since that day, he's never accepted food from me and never bullied me. Did I forget that his mouth was swollen for weeks due to the spice? I did not regret getting my revenge on the bully. Honestly, considering the history and what this bully did to OP, I'm surprised that just having that spicy food was enough for them to go, alright, I'm leaving this person alone. I feel like it would have only intensified it. But hey, props to OP for finally getting back against this horrendous person. That said, our next story is, fiancé cheats on me 1 month before the wedding, so I left him at the altar. I've gone through some really traumatic stuff in life. The worst one was when both my parents died in a car accident when I was little. I was supposed to be with them in the car that night, but my cousin Stacy just got a new Barbie doll, and I couldn't stop playing with it. So my parents settled on letting me stay over in my aunt's house since it was summer break. The next morning, we got the news that there had been an accident. I was angry for the longest time, but there was nobody to blame. We weren't religious people, so I don't believe there's a God up there pulling the strings, so I can't be mad at him. The second traumatic stuff that I faced in my life happened a few months ago, and it happened at a time when I thought all my troubles are over, and it would only be upwards for me from here. I was set to be married to the love of my life, and nothing could ruin it for me. At least that was what I thought till I caught my husband to be cheating on me with my wedding planner. How ironic that the person that was supposed to help me bring my dream day to fruition was the one who ruined it all. I still have trouble sleeping or trusting people after that happened to me, but I made sure I wasn't the only one who was gonna feel that pain. So I ruined his life. But before the details on how I did that, let's start with Kay and the day I met him. The day I now refer to as the most unlucky day of my life. I was fresh out of college and working as a junior associate at a law firm. My daily routine only involved work, and more work. I wanted to impress the guys at the top, so I totally abandoned my social life. My roommate Sandy warned against this. She was always telling me to go out more and be more social. One time, she even faked an emergency at a club to get me to come, but when I saw that she was lying about the emergency, I turned back and left. Anyways, one day, my hard work was starting to get the notice it deserved. I was working in my office as usual when one of the assistants came to tell me that one of the partners was looking for me. That was strange to me because I'd only been working in the firm for a few months, and I didn't even expect that the senior associates would know my name, talk less of the partners. I quickly rearranged myself and walked over to take the elevator up. When I got to the office, the partner, Mr. Braden, told me that he'd been keeping tabs on all the new employees and that he liked my work ethic, and because of that, he wanted me to do some work because he was trying to bring in a new client to the firm, and he wanted me to do all the necessary research. I was more than happy to. I spent the next few sleepless nights working on the assignment, and when it was done, I submitted the work to Mr. Braden. He thanked me, and when I was about to leave, he asked me where I was going. It was lunch break already, and I was hoping to get some Danish before the other guys hogged them all. He told me there was still work to be done, and I was going to accompany him to the lunch meeting he had with the client. I was so happy about his request that I forgot all about the Danish. Later that afternoon, I went with Mr. Braden to the 4-star restaurant where the meeting was held. I was there to merely jot down notes and all, but still, I couldn't stop the excitement that bubbled through me. The client also came with one of the guys in his firm, but at first I didn't notice him. My eyes were fixed on the jotter which I was using to take notes, and when I finally looked up, which was when the meeting was almost over, I caught the client's associate staring at me. As soon as our eyes met, he averted his gaze and his face flushed. I was surprised by his reaction, but I didn't let myself get distracted. I had reports to give for the meeting, and I had to stay on point. Less than 20 minutes later, the meeting ended, and we were ready to go back to the office. I looked at the client's associate again, and he looked a bit uneasy. It was though he had something on his mind that he wanted to say, but he couldn't. I shrugged it off, and we both left the restaurant. I didn't hear from Mr. Braden for the next few days after that. At first, I thought I did a poor job with the report, but that wasn't the case. Exactly 1 week after the meeting at the restaurant, I went to get a new cup of coffee from the break room, and Mr. Braden came to meet me there. He told me that the client would be coming on board, which was a huge win for the firm. He also wanted me to accompany him to the restaurant the next day. The client had some documents to sign, and he wanted to go with someone the client had already seen. The next morning, I got to work bright and early because the client would only be available for a breakfast meeting. When we got to the restaurant, they were already seated, and the client was with the other guy from the last meeting. As soon as we settled on our seats, our eyes met and he gave me a soft smirk, which I responded to with a nod. By the end of the short meeting, Mr. Braden and I had started to leave when the other guy rose from his seat and asked to talk to me in private. I said okay, and we excused ourselves from Mr. Braden and the client who were still talking. The man introduced himself as Kay. One thing I found intriguing about him was the fact that even though he was somewhat shy, he was very direct and went straight to the point. He told me he liked me and he'd like to take me out for dinner. I was shocked. To be honest, all the times he stole glances at me, I thought he did so because of my commitment to the job. I had no idea he was looking at me because he liked me. Don't blame me for my cluelessness, blame the fact that I hadn't had a boyfriend since the second year of college. I also thought Kay was cute too, but I didn't think it would be professional for me to go on a date with a client, and I told him this. He promptly explained that he wasn't affiliated with the client's company, he was a friend. Still, I didn't think the time was right for me to start dating. I had lots of things to achieve career-wise, and I wouldn't like to have anything stop me from doing that. Kay said he understood, but he gave me his business card just in case I changed my mind. Which I did later that night after Sandy gave me a 2-hour lecture on living life and not allowing work to stop me from having fun. I didn't really care for all she said. I only called Kay so she would shut up. We talked for a moment and decided to have dinner that Friday night. It was a Tuesday when I called him, and by that Friday, I'd totally forgotten about the date. Not until Sandy called me to remind me not to stand him up. I had to go for the date straight from work because I'd planned to work late, and Sandy called me less than 30 minutes before the predetermined time for the date. I only had time to finish my work and take a cab to the restaurant where we were supposed to meet. Kay was already there waiting for me, and I apologized for not having the time to get back home and grab a change of clothes. He waved me off, saying he understood that my work was hectic, and he was only glad that I changed my mind. We spent the whole date talking about our dreams and career, and I even forgot to eat. I learned that Kay was a college professor and he wanted to go into politics in the near future. I thought that was really cool, and since I was an ambitious woman myself, we clicked really well. By the end of the date, he drove me home and we said goodnight. All I wanted at the end of that outing was to crawl up into bed and sleep till my alarm woke me up in the morning. But Sandy wouldn't even let me leave the living room till she'd gotten every bit of information about the date from me. The next morning, while I was making my favorite weekend breakfast, Kay called me and asked if I wanted to hang out again. Saturday was my me time, but just when I was about to refuse his offer, Sandy threw me a look that meant, "I'm gonna kill you if you say no." Eventually, I said yes to his offer, and I ditched my weekend breakfast and went to get ready. 1 hour later, he was outside the apartment waiting for me. We grabbed breakfast at a fast food restaurant before going to the cinema to see a movie. I actually thought we were just going to spend the morning together, but I was having so much fun that the next time I checked my watch, hours had passed, and we were already in the evening. We ended up hanging out till late that night. By the time I got home, Sandy could tell from my look that I'd had a lot of fun. Kay and I started to hang out more often after that, and within the next month, we were officially a couple. I thought Kay was cute and sweet, and I always had so much fun with him. He was also never demanding of my time, and he even encouraged me to go for what I want. He was perfect. Too perfect that one time. I got scared that he wasn't real, and it was all an act. Months passed by in this fashion, and the most intense fight we ever had was about who left the toilet seat open. It was only natural that I thought it was going to last forever. And the day he proposed to me during a weekend we spent in Nassau, I was so happy that I didn't know when the tears started to stream off my face. I thought I was going to have my happily ever after. But sadly, happily ever after doesn't exist. The wedding was set, and the date had been chosen. All that remained was the planning. Normally, I would have done that myself, but because of my schedule at work, at this time, I was already being considered for senior associate. I didn't have the time to put in the work, and because of this, I decided to hire a wedding planner. I hired a lady named Val, and at the first meeting, I was really taken with her skills. So I decided to introduce her to Kay. He had more free time than I did, so I thought it would be okay for him to oversee the wedding preparation. During the first meeting we all had together, I noticed the side glances Kay and Val were exchanging, but I was stupid enough to not think that it meant anything. Kay was asking questions, and I felt it was normal for some people to just stare while asking and receiving answers to the questions. I waved it off as nothing, but during the second meeting, it was obvious that something was going on. Val was dressed way differently than the other time we talked. Her skirt was really short, and her top exposed way more cleavage than you'd expect for something that should be a semi-formal meeting. But still, I decided to wave it off. I trusted Kay, and I knew he would never cheat on me, or at least I thought so. The next meeting with Val, the wedding planner, was scheduled just a month before the wedding, and I wasn't supposed to show up because I had a lot of work to do. So Kay decided to talk to Val as we agreed. I was supposed to meet with a new client coming to the firm, but unfortunately something came up, and the client had to reschedule. I decided to head over to Kay's apartment to meet up with them for the meeting. As soon as I got into the living room, I knew something was amiss. The last time we had the meeting, it was done in the living room, but now it was empty. Val's purse was on the couch, so I knew that she was around. I was about to check out the balcony when I heard a weird noise coming from the bedroom. I didn't want to believe it, but it sounded like people moaning. I literally had to drag myself over to the door to check what was going on. The door wasn't closed, and with just a slight push, I could see everything going on in the room. It was Kay and Val, naked and going at it like animals. I wanted to scream and fight and claw her eyes out, but I was overwhelmed with sadness that it didn't matter. I stood there for more than a minute and they didn't notice me. They just kept on going. Then I got an idea. I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures and then left the apartment without making a sound. I didn't let Kay know that I saw him and Val, and I just acted oblivious to their affair for the next 1 month. But when it was time for the wedding, that was when I struck my blow. When the priest asked if I would take Kay to be my lawfully wedded husband, I said no in front of everyone in attendance, which involved his friends, work colleagues, and even some people in government whom he was talking to concerning his political ambition. They were all shocked, but no one was as surprised as Kay. When asked why I said no, I explained how I caught him cheating with the wedding planner, who was also in attendance. I even showed everyone the pictures on the big screen before I turned to leave. I didn't take a second to look at Kay, and I just walked out of the hall. I'm sure with a stain like that on his reputation, he would never achieve his dream of becoming a politician. While I do think this is a fair and just revenge, I don't even know if OP's last sentence applies anymore. With the stuff that's gone on in the last few years in politics, I'm not sure if this is a death sentence for their political career anymore. I mean, heck, way back in the day, JFK was sleeping around all the time. It's not like it's a newfangled thing. My roommate stole from me, so I sorted him out. I grew up in a pretty disciplined home. My dad was an army veteran who had done 2 tours in Afghanistan, and while he didn't want that kind of life for us, he still treated my sisters and I like soldiers. My older sister Ada had once jokingly called him a drill sergeant, which he had luckily laughed at good-naturedly. Basically, he trained and drilled us to be efficient and take orders. Now, don't get me wrong, my dad wasn't an unfeeling meanhead who was only interested in ordering us around. He was a pretty awesome man. He took up a job as a police officer after his military service and was a big softie to almost everyone who met him. After experiencing the harshness of war, my dad believed that kindness went a long way in making people happy, and he was intent in spreading joy everywhere he went. He loved to hang out with the homeless, and he'd bring food and clothing to them and chat with them about their lives. This helped in many ways. For one, homeless people saw a lot of things that happened on the streets, and the people my father helped were, like any other member of society, just trying to survive, and they wanted to live in a safe community just like anyone else. They were usually not very open to helping police officers though, because they saw police officers as oppressive, which is understandable considering that more often than not, the encounters between cops and homeless people were to force them out of a particular place, or interrogate them as a suspect for crimes they probably didn't commit. My father's kindness to them was not only a breath of fresh air, it built trust, and they gave information to my dad that helped put a lot of bad people in jail. The second advantage of this symbiotic relationship was that oftentimes the kindness and support that my father showed these people was a spark that gave them hope and motivation to get off the streets. He had helped a lot of people this way and was very proud of the work he had done. My dad was also quite kind to us at home, but he was of the belief that life didn't hand anything for free, and we had to work hard and be disciplined, and so he was quite strict with us. Notwithstanding this, we loved him very much, and we could approach him to talk about just about anything. A big part of my father's training involved ensuring that personal hygiene was seen as important. He would always have us make our bed the moment we got out of it, and the general rule around the house was clean up after yourself. This included doing your dishes after eating and always folding your laundry the moment it got in. My dad also made sure we followed a strict timetable and that my sisters and I were never tardy to anything. All my life, all I knew was the lifestyle that my dad had enforced in us. And so I didn't really know any other way of living. I knew that other people lived differently, but personally I'd never really experienced it. That was the way I lived until I got admission to college and I met my roommate Matthew. Matt had resumed school a day earlier than I had, but he'd already added his style to the room. Apparently he was big on rock and roll and had hung posters all around the room. He had also brought in a mini fridge and had filled it up with beer. Now, my first impression when I met Matt was that he was different, and I honestly was quite excited for it. Every day for the past 18 years, I had lived with the same people and lived the same way, and for once, I was going to get the chance to be in a different environment with different people, and Matt was going to be the first of those people. In fact, my parents don't know this, one of the main reasons I only applied to schools at least 2 states away was exactly because of this. I wasn't trying to be wild or anything though, I just wanted a little variety to my life, a little excitement. So when I moved in, I spent hours talking to Matt about everything. I really wanted to know as much as I possibly could. We talked about our interests, what majors we were going to do, and just about everything else. He even offered me a beer, and I, after tons of convincing, accepted it. I really didn't enjoy it. By the way, beer tastes weird. I was convinced that we were going to be best of friends, and I was looking forward to it. Perhaps if I had known what was to happen, I'd have been more cautious of Matt. But oh well. The first sign that Matt was going to be problematic was his hygiene. The first week in the room, I could swear he never took a bath. He also dropped everything on the floor, trash, his clothes, used dishes. There were just the 2 of us, so he couldn't even really claim that it was anyone else. At first I was fine with it. Well, maybe not fine, but I wasn't really pissed off about it. When I came back from classes, I'd clean up the room as much as I could and move his clothes to his bed. Heck, I even did his dishes a few times. However, as time went on, it seemed like he was getting too comfortable with me cleaning up for him, and he just gave up altogether. The room started to have a really funky smell, and there were stains on the floor that I didn't even want to know what they were. Dishes filled the sink and they were kept there for so long that they started to stink too. It really was very bad. Starting to feel very annoyed about it, I decided that the best option for me was to talk to him about it. So one Friday evening, I sat him down and I told him that he needed to do better when it came to hygiene. I told him that his behavior was affecting me gravely and I suggested that he work on it. To help, I suggested setting up a timetable to help with organizing tasks and even cleaning together. The entire time, he was pretty mellow and it seemed like he was thinking really hard about it. Perhaps I'd gotten to him, I thought. After a while, he told me he'd think about it, that perhaps we could talk about it again the next day. When I asked why it had to wait till the next day, he said he had a party to attend and he would be in a better state of mind to talk then, so I let him go. I didn't see Matt again for another 4 days. In that time, his number was unavailable and I was already considering contacting the police to report him as missing. Then he randomly just showed up and acted like nothing had happened. Again, I tried talking to him, but no matter what I tried, he always either made an excuse not to talk about it or he'd just say, okay, and then do nothing about it. Frustrated, I just resolved to keep on doing what I'd been doing, and I convinced myself that if it ever got too much, I would just report to the hall admin. Then came the stealing. At first, it was just little things like a sandwich I'd saved for later or my pens. I ended up buying a lot of pens. It was kind of annoying because I'd always been the kind of person who organized everything, so I sort of had the expectation of where my things were supposed to be at any given point in time. So imagine how annoying it is to try to get my sandwich, which I'd carefully planned for dinner, and realizing that Matt had eaten it and left no replacement. I knew that talking to him wasn't going to yield any positive results. I'd tried this before with the whole cleaning up thing, remember? So instead, I just tried to be very careful with my things, and when possible, I hid my stuff. There are 2 main issues with this though. For one, there's only so much you can hide in your room. Instinctively, you feel safe in your room, and you're bound to leave things just lying around. It's only when it goes missing that you recall you'd made the mistake of keeping it within reach of your thieving roommate. The second thing is that even hiding wasn't an efficient way of keeping things out of reach of Matt. He would simply just look for them, and knowing me, it's very easy to predict where I'd keep my things. It's usually in the most expected place possible. I started to consider getting a safe or a cupboard with a lock after my wallet went missing. The wallet had my school ID, my credit card, and $55 in cash. I instantly suspected Matt, but I had no evidence he had taken it, and it didn't seem right to just accuse him of stealing it. I had to go to the bank to block access to my credit card to prevent any unauthorized access into my account. I got another wallet and I'd applied to the school for another ID when I walked into the room one day to see my old wallet sticking out from under my bed. I knew it had been planted there because when I opened it, all that was missing was the cash. I began to be very paranoid around Matt, and I seriously was considering reporting to the school, but I didn't. It wasn't until Matt went too far that I decided I'd had enough. During the semester break, I went home to spend some time with my family. While I was with them, my father had given me the antique watch of my granduncle who had recently passed. Apparently, he had bequeathed that, along with a fair amount of money for my education, to me. Now, the watch was quite expensive, and I honestly considered not taking it with me back to school, but I was quite close to my granduncle while he was alive, and the thought of having a part of him close to me was comforting. I decided to bring the watch with me to school, but leave it locked up somewhere safe. I wouldn't tell anyone about its existence. That should work, right? A week after resuming school, I walked into the room to see it trashed. Instinctively, I went to where I kept the watch. It was gone. Other things were missing too, and I knew that we had been robbed. I immediately called 911 and then Matt. I never considered, even for a second, that Matt had been responsible. The police dispatched a couple of officers who asked Matt and I a bunch of questions. After that, they told us that an investigation was open and that if they got any info, they'd let us know. The thought that I had lost such a priceless item so soon made me absolutely mad at myself. For days, I sulked and spent hours just brooding about it all. I had called my dad to report what had happened, and he had told me that he was confident the watch would be found. Even if he wasn't, he said, it took more than physical property to keep the memory of my granduncle. I had decided to leave it all up to fate till one day I, while cleaning the room, saw a little glint from Matt's bed. Now, normally I would have probably ignored what I saw, but for some reason I moved towards the glint, which was coming from something tucked under his pillow. Whatever it was had just a bit of it sticking out the side, and the sun's rays had caused it to reflect. As I picked up his pillow, there was my granduncle's watch right there staring at me. I couldn't believe it. Matt had stolen the watch. I stood there speechless, thinking of what to do. By the time I finally managed to move, I knew what I had to do. Matt had gone too far, and I was going to make sure he paid. Normally, I would have confronted Matt about it and maybe also requested to have my room switched, but it was time he got the punishment he deserved. The plan I had in mind was very simple yet effective. I took the watch I had now found, and then I called one of the police officers that had come over when I reported the robbery. He had given me his number, and I told him I had information for him and requested that he come. When he got there, I told him that I found the watch in the custody of Matt. I showed him the watch, and he asked me if I wanted to escalate things. I escalated things. Not only did Matt get arrested for theft, but he also got charged with purchase of alcohol as a minor and falsifying his identity. Apparently, he had used a fake ID to buy the beers that were constantly in his mini fridge. Matt also got reported to school and was expelled. During his trial, I had testified against him, and my testimony was strong enough to ensure conviction. However, he didn't get any jail time. His lawyer had been pretty good, and had argued to the court that as a first-time offender, he'd be given a light sentence. So the judge sentenced him to do community service for 60 days and a year of probation. The damage was done though, and I was glad that I'd finally gotten some form of justice. I'm certain now that my enthusiasm for wanting to experience life differently from how it was in my family was a big mistake. I'm absolutely convinced I don't want to have another roommate ever again. Maybe in time this opinion will change, but for now that's what it is. I wish I didn't have to go as far as I did with Matthew, but I know that if I didn't, he'd have done worse, so I'm sort of glad I did. I think this is one of those situations where you experienced the absolute lowest end of the spectrum, and you've allowed that to ruin the experience of kind of living on your own, and also seeing a side of things that aren't what your family forced you to experience. That said, OP definitely let this go on way too long without ever reporting any of it. Our next story is, I took the money meant for my brother's college. My revenge against my brother was taking the money meant for his college education. I carefully planned to get money from his college funds for my mother, and I succeeded. He went to college eventually, but not having the funds meant for his education set him back by years. He left college with student loans that he would have never had to obtain in the first place if he had gotten the funds meant for his college education. My mom had my brother and me when she was really young. She met my dad when they were both in high school. They were together for a while after high school when she had my brother, and nearly 2 years later she had me. My mom lived with my dad in his mother's house, and my paternal grandmother took care of us all for a while, but she soon got tired. She was a teacher and wasn't saving enough for her retirement because she had to take care of 2 adults and 2 children. She asked to speak with my mom one day and told her that she needed my mom and her children, my brother and me, to leave her house. Interestingly, she never threw my dad, her son, out. My dad also never tried to rent a place for his small family. He left the house when he knew my mom was leaving. He probably didn't want to deal with the guilt of seeing us leave and being unable or unwilling to do anything about it. We heard later that he got another woman pregnant, and she moved in with my grandmother until my grandmother died. My mom was sad about what had happened. She couldn't return to her parents' home because they were conservative Christians and had sent her out when she was pregnant with my brother anyway. We moved into a house provided by a church in our community for single mothers and women who needed a temporary place to stay away from their abusive husbands or partners. While we lived there, my mom was offered a job by a member of the church that offered us a place to stay. She was to work as a receptionist at a small law firm. My mom accepted the offer and soon started working towards getting her high school diploma. We weren't rich, but things got better than they were and we could afford basic stuff. Things got even better for us when my mom met a wealthy lawyer in the course of her work as a paralegal. My mom and the lawyer dated secretly for a while because they were ashamed of their relationship. The lawyer was 35 years older than my mom, and he died before I could have strong memories of him. But I remember that he and my mom were in love with each other. My mom says he's the only man who's ever shown her true love. Even after he had died, she maintained that he was the only man with whom she ever felt genuine love. Naturally, since he was a lot older than my mom and was richer too, everyone in the church assumed she was with him because of the money. The church pastor didn't approve of my mom's relationship with him. When he proposed to her and she agreed to marry him, the pastor refused to give his blessings. He insisted that my mom could not marry the lawyer because he was not a believer, and because he didn't believe that my mom was marrying him for godly reasons. The lawyer was irritated by the pastor's comment and his assumed authority over my mother, but he kept his cool, and he and my mom kept dating. They never got married, but my mom got fed up with the pastor's obsession with controlling her life. We left the church house and the church too, and moved in with the rich lawyer. He never wanted my mom to work outside the home. Since the career opportunities available for her were limited anyway, my mom agreed to stay at home and take care of us in the home. Our time in his house is the most pleasant memory I have of my childhood. My brother and I had enough food to eat, enough snacks, and too many toys. We also had nice clothes and stopped getting hand-me-downs from the people at church. He didn't just treat my mom nicely, but he was a sweet dad to us too. He paid for everything we had to do in school, too. The experience was great. Sadly, he got a terminal illness as time passed, and he died. After he died, his ex-wife filed a case against my mom. She believed that she should inherit his house and that my mom, brother, and I had to move out. She was quite influential, more educated than my mom, and could afford good lawyers to help her. My mom was hardly knowledgeable about things like that and wasn't college educated. She also had no money, so she didn't contest the case and simply let it all go. We had to move to the town where my mom grew up. Her siblings had all moved out of the house, her dad was dead, and it was just her mom. We moved into the house, and while it wasn't as bad as when we lived in the church house, it certainly wasn't as good as when we lived with my mom's boyfriend. My mom was heartbroken, but she managed to find a good job in town and took good care of my brother and me. Some years later, my mom's late boyfriend's lawyer reached out to us. He had apparently set up a college fund for my older brother. My mom was very grateful, I'm sure he would have done the same for you if he'd stayed alive a little longer," my mom said to me later that week. I got back at my brother by ensuring that my mother spent the money on something else. My brother had to repeat a grade in high school, so we were in the same grade at the time. He was a big bully, but he was brilliant, and that was the only reason the school didn't kick him out. He looked forward to going to college. Funnily, his reason for going to college was to spite our father. He badly wanted to prove himself to everyone. Of course, he was banking on the money my mom's boyfriend had in store for him. There was no better way to hurt my brother than to ensure he didn't go to college. My best friend in school had a stepdad who was a known gangster. Everyone knew he sold drugs too. He had been in and out of jail many times. My mom had warned me many times to stay away from my best friend because everyone knew his stepdad to be dangerous and working for even more dangerous people. My best friend wasn't about that life though. He actively avoided getting into that business, even though his mom was involved too. The plan was to convince my mom that I was owing a drug lord a huge amount of money and that he was going to end me. That way, my mom would be forced to pay up with a huge chunk of my brother's college fund. To make the whole thing believable, I started to run errands for my best friend's stepdad. He was horrified at first, but I let him in on my plans and he let me be. It was from working for my best friend's stepdad that I realized that he had a boss, and his boss has a boss. It was a whole network and hierarchy of bosses. My best friend suggested that I actually lose some of his stepdad's goods and run away. That would make him send his boys to my grandma's house to look for me. On one of the days he sent me on an errand, I ran home with the goods and hid them under my bed. As my best friend and I expected, his stepdad sent some boys to my grandma's house. My mom was horrified to see that I was dealing with those kinds of people. I handed them the goods I ran away with when they asked. That meant one thing. My best friend's stepdad had fired me. He never joked about his business. A week after, my mom had had a complete emotional breakdown about the new company I was keeping. I packed a bag and ran away. Well, I wanted my mom and brother to think I ran away. My mom was beside herself with grief, worrying about my safety. Eventually, I sneaked home one evening and told her what had happened. I lied that I'd gotten mixed up with some drug dealers. I was going to deliver some drugs to another person, and I was robbed of them. I told her the gang leaders were after me because they thought I'd run away with their goods. My mom was scared. She grew up in the same neighborhood, so she knew how dangerous those gangs could be. After exploring several options, she decided to dip into my brother's college funds. My mom could never let my brother know that she was using his college funds to repay a debt and save my life. He would have never have allowed it. Instead, she lied to him about having a health emergency. Even though she had lied about her health, my brother still managed to throw a tantrum. He left the house for a while and then returned later, refusing to speak to anyone. When my mom handed me the money to pay back the gangsters, my best friend and I went over to the bank to deposit the money in his brother's account. His brother was someone we could trust, so we had him keep the money in a fixed deposit until I needed it. I could not think of a better way to punish my brother than what I did. My brother cost my mom too much heartache. She was always spending lots of money, time, and energy trying to get him out of one trouble or the other. He assaulted and bullied many people, even my best friend and me growing up. My mom would explain away his behavior and make excuses for him. She never let him take responsibility for his crappy behavior. She would say that the reason that he was hostile was because he witnessed our birth dad being hostile towards her. My mom never spoke with no holds barred about all that my dad did to her, but I suspect that he used to hit her. My brother was older and had a more formed memory of our birth dad than I did. My brother was very selfish and would never do anything for anyone other than himself. He had academic excellence going on for him, but other than that, he was a complete jerkbag. He would mock and bully anyone who he perceived as weak. I was his first victim. I was terrified of my brother because he got angry very often, and when he did, he would punch me and grab my neck. It was never a pleasant sight. Even my mom would worry about leaving me at home with him. I was helpless and small because my brother was huge and had the muscular physique of our birth dad. He got away with hitting me too many times because my mother hardly ever confronted him about his behavior. She was almost as scared of him as I was. Despite my brother's aggressive behavior, he had good grades in school and would represent the school in quiz and essay competitions. He won most of them too. I knew I had to stop my mom from pouring all that money into my brother's education when my brother got a lot of money from an essay competition he participated in. We needed the money in the family. At the time, my grandma's house where we lived had a lot of things that needed repairing, and we barely had enough groceries. My mom worked at a bookshop, and her pay was barely enough for us. My brother could have done something for the family, but he didn't. He went to my birth dad, who lived in the same town as us, but never bothered to be an actual father to us. My dad, being just as selfish and inconsiderate as my brother, tricked my brother and took all of his money. My mom warned my brother, but he didn't listen. He even moved some of his stuff to live with my dad and his new family. My mom felt betrayed and cried about it for the whole week. When my brother returned, she took him in, but I knew that something had changed. She no longer prioritized him as she used to. She also stopped making excuses for him and left him to deal with the consequences of his behavior. It was at that time that he was suspended for a semester, another gross misconduct, and had to repeat a grade. My mom pretended that the whole episode with my dad hadn't happened, but I never forgot. My brother had the chance to do something for his family, but he ran away to my birth dad, who didn't care about us. I knew the best way to get back at my brother was to take up the college funds and return them to my mother in the future. That worked, and as soon as my brother started his journey in college and was able to work his way around getting loans, I had my best friend's brother return the money to me, and I gave it to my mother. My mom hardly had a solid retirement plan, so it made sense to let her use the money instead. I know it was meant for a different purpose, but my brother didn't seem like a credible investment anyway. He came about money for a while and abandoned the family he'd always known. Thankfully, my brother is a brilliant kid, and he found his way around the university on his own. My mom, as usual, tried to mask her happiness when I confessed what really happened to her. I know she was glad I helped her to save some money though. She was also relieved that I was never part of any drug-dealing gang. My brother having to navigate college with very little support from my mother helped develop his character. He stopped bullying people and finally became more responsible with money. Although stealing somebody's college funds is pretty cruel, I'm glad that overall in OP's situation, it seems to have worked out pretty darn well for them. It seems like pretty much everybody's in a pretty darn good place, and can you really be too upset at the actions taken if things worked out that well in the end? It's nice to see that their jerk of a brother had character development. I called Child Protective Services and had them take my sister's children away. Usually, when people have to get back at their sibling, it's almost always a half-sibling or step-sibling. That was not the case with my sister and me. My sister and I are full siblings. We grew up together and were raised in the same house. My sister and I are proof that two people can grow up experiencing abuse and still turn out very differently. Our mom was terribly abusive towards us when we were kids. She would hit us and then apologize to us in tears later at night. Although she worked very hard and made sure we went to school and had all that we needed and some of the things we wanted, she would punish us by taking everything back the minute she was not pleased with us. One of my earliest memories was of my mom buying me a beautiful teal blue dress for a dance at school. I can't remember what I did, but I'm sure it was something children did at the time. Something very childish and insignificant. My mom was so mad at me that she took my teal blue dress and gave it to my sister. I wailed when it happened, but my mom couldn't be bothered. I think she may have even enjoyed it when we cried. Our dad left when we were little. He gave no reason. He just got up one day, left, and only came back 4 years after. He didn't even divorce my mom. They were married. He just completely ghosted her. The year he left, my mom broke down completely and my siblings and I witnessed too many emotional meltdowns. She went to the police to file a missing persons report, and she had every family member and friend looking for him. After a month, the police found him in another state, and my dad lied about running from the house because my mom was abusive. He also lied that they were separated. My mom was abusive towards us and her children, but she was never mean to my dad. If anything, she worshipped him and he treated her like dirt. My mom was mean to my sister and me, but she was less mean to our brother. She hardly ever corrected him and was cool with nearly everything he did, even if what he did was disrespect my sister and me. We were older than him. While I don't think my mom became abusive because my dad left, she became a lot meaner to us after he left. She kept providing for us, but she would seize our stuff and starve us if we didn't do what she wanted. My sister and I hardly had any friends because my mom would complain about our friends. They were either bad girls who wanted to introduce us to boys and drugs, or they were sassy and would teach us to disobey and disrespect her. Having a boyfriend was a huge no too. We simply were not allowed to date at all. I didn't have a boyfriend until after high school, but my sister found her way around my mom's rules and secretly dated her boyfriend, who later became the father of her children. Her relationship was kept secret for a while, but my mom and everyone else soon found out about it. At this time, my mom had gotten herself a boyfriend and was too preoccupied with her relationship to care about whatever my sister and I were doing. Just as my dad was a chronic on and off father, my sister's boyfriend would regularly just ghost her. He would stop speaking to her for months, and whenever that happened, she would fail woefully in school. She used to play tennis and was a great player too, but whenever he left her again or they had any sort of argument, she would fall apart and abandon tennis altogether. It was almost like she lived for him. Without him, she couldn't function well. I tried to talk to her about her behavior many times, but my sister never listened. Instead, she would hit me. I could have hit back and even beaten her up if I wanted to. My sister was a year older than me, but she was smaller and, I dare say, weaker. She was the athlete, but I did a lot of running and boxing then too and could have easily beaten her up. For some reason, I never did. I just let her slap me around. I try to look away each time she embarrasses herself whenever her boyfriend leaves her, but I just couldn't. It was hard, not just because she was my sister, but because I got secondhand embarrassment just watching her make a fool of herself every time. My sister and I ought to have graduated from high school together since we were in the same grade, but she dropped out in her senior year. She just stopped going to school. I wanted to tell my mom about it, but I was scared that my mom would hit her. One day, I decided that I was going to tell my mom that my sister had stopped coming to school. I knew she was dropping out because of her boyfriend who had dropped out the year before. I hoped my mom would just make her return to school, but she didn't. She just laughed and promised my sister that she was going to have a horrible life without an education. Women who have great jobs in education don't even find it easy to get by. Without an education and a decent job, you're doomed. I never expected you to amount to anything anyway, my mom had said. My sister never returned to school. She got a job at a cafe close to our home and lived with my mom. She soon got pregnant with her first son. I wasn't at home when that happened. I'd gone off to college. When I returned home 2 years later, she was pregnant with her second son. My mom was constantly mad at my sister. She wanted her to move out of her house, but my sister wouldn't leave. My mom was either too weak to do anything about it, or she was secretly happy that she had a child who was completely dependent on her and had someone to boss around. One day, my sister stole a large amount of money from my mom and ran away with her boyfriend and their son. My mom was devastated. She cursed my sister every day and became very hostile toward me. I could no longer live in such a toxic environment, so I left. My brother came along with me. We got an apartment of our own and split the bills. While I paid the larger share of our rent, my brother bought groceries and took care of our feeding. He owned a small fast food business anyway, so I never worried about food. All I did was work and try to build my career. One day, my brother told me that someone we knew had walked into his food shop to eat and had told him that my sister was struggling with drug addiction and that she was in a bad shape. I knew my sister used recreational drugs often, but I didn't think that she was or could be addicted to anything. Aside from her boyfriend, of course. Her boyfriend was rumored to have worked for a drug dealer before, but we never took it seriously. It wasn't unusual for that sort of thing to happen in our neighborhood anyway. I told my brother that we had to reach out to her and see how she was doing, but he refused. She's decided on the path to walk on. We really can't help her at this point. She's a lost cause." I remember thinking my brother was selfish. I got mad at him. He had no right to declare her a lost cause. He was on the verge of dropping out of high school too, and had even gotten mixed up with some gangsters on the streets. If it hadn't been for my intervention, he'd never have been able to train as a cook and own a business. We have to do something. She may have behaved badly in the past, but she's still our sister." My brother shrugged. "I'll make sure to remind you that I told you so," he said, and walked away. I was pissed by his comment, but I didn't bother with a response. I understood his concerns. My sister had proved to be grossly irresponsible over the years. She dropped out of school, quit all the jobs she managed to get, without even giving her employers a notice, and got pregnant twice by a man who couldn't afford to take care of his children or even himself. I called her and she told me that her ex had been hitting her. He started hitting her when they moved in together. I asked her to come over to our apartment and live with my brother and me. She agreed, and I sent her money for bus tickets. She came over with her 2 sons, to the annoyance of my brother. He was so mad at her that he wouldn't even look at her. I was preparing for my wedding at the time, and my fiance and I were saving money, but I had to talk to him about cutting down on our expenses so I could pay for my sister to go to rehab. The 3 months she spent away were very hard for me. I had to take care of her boys, argued a lot with my brother who just could not deal with having kids around, and even argued a lot with my fiancé because I barely had time for him since I had my hands full. When my sister returned, she continued to live with us, and while she found it difficult to get a job, she was very helpful around the house. I had promised my brother that she would leave as soon as she returned from rehab, but when she did return, I couldn't ask her to leave, since she had no money of her own. My brother was mad and soon moved out, which put a strain on our relationship for a while and, of course, burdened me with more responsibilities. I had already asked to postpone the wedding just so I could bounce back. One day, I spoke to my sister about getting a job and she flared up. I was irritated and told her to stop being so irresponsible. She almost hit me. It brought back my memories of how she used to hit me when we were in high school. I was livid and threatened to beat her up if she tried. She ran to the guest room where she stayed and slammed the door. While I was very mad at my sister, I understood her behavior and was willing to move past it. I just wanted her to get a job so she could move on with her life and stand on her feet again. For 3 days, my sister refused to speak to me. She actively avoided me, but I wasn't bothered. I figured she would be ready to talk later. One day, I returned from work and she was gone. She had left with her kids and gone back to her boyfriend. It hurt me what she did and it was hard to move on from it, but I did it anyway. Months later, I started getting calls from her. She was using again and her man would regularly bring women home, and if she dared to confront him, he would hit her. I refused to listen to her. My husband, we had a small wedding later, encouraged me to ignore her too. She clearly does not want to be helped, he said to me. I let it be, but I still wanted to help her. I had memories of my sister when she was a bright, helpful young girl. She was athletic and brilliant. I kept thinking I could help her. Maybe if I just tried, she could go back to being as great as she used to be. I also saw how much my sister loved her kids. She was willing to do anything for them. And I felt she could be willing to become more responsible for them too. I invited her over to my house. My husband wasn't happy about this, but I promised him that it was my last try. When she came with her kids, she managed to get a job at my brother's fast food shop. I was glad that things were looking up for her, but she soon left the job. She didn't tell me why, and my brother didn't tell me why she left either, so I let it be. It wasn't until much later that my brother told me that he had caught her buying drugs from someone. He was angry because he knew how much I'd spent to get her into rehab. I confronted her, but she said nothing to me. She just looked away. The last straw for me was when I returned from work one evening and met my sister and my husband in our bedroom and had a heated argument. I was so curious about why they were arguing that I didn't even notice that my sister was wearing a red robe that belonged to me, and her body was visible under the robe. It turned out that my sister had noticed that my husband was not going to work that day and had snuck into our bedroom and tried to seduce him. I wasn't even surprised. I'd always known that she secretly resented my success and the fact that I had a loving and supportive spouse. I gave her a week to leave my house. She tried to move in with my mom, but my mom was not having it. She called the police the minute she saw her. My husband didn't feel safe leaving her in our home when we went to work, so whenever we were leaving for work, we would lock the bedroom door. One day I forgot to lock the door and only remembered when I was already at work. I rushed over to my team leader and told him that I had an emergency. I drove home, and as if I was clairvoyant, I saw my sister in our bedroom, frantically searching everywhere. I had some wads of cash in the drawer next to my bed. She had brought it out and placed it on the floor. I knew she was looking for money. When I caught her, she started screaming and tried to attack me. She couldn't, of course, as I was bigger and stronger. I called Child Protective Services the next day. I told them that she was a violent drug abuser and that the boys are not safe with her. They came and took her boys away while she wailed and cursed at me. Since she refused to leave my house, I called the cops on her too. That was how I got back at my ungrateful sister. Honestly, the saddest part of this story is that while OP resorted to these things and got their revenge, you know just on the way OP was saying things that deep down inside, it was the last thing they wanted to do. It's just they were given no other option when your sibling is so self-destructive. I mean, they're so self-destructive, it started becoming destruction for other people too. That said, our next story is, husband cheats on me with sister, so I take his life savings. I read in a newspaper article or a magazine somewhere that men have a hard time controlling their sexual desires. I know this is true because back in high school, guys would say anything, literally say anything just for you to get with them. It's weird, but still I appreciated that fact. And that was why I forgave my college boyfriend Greg when he cheated on me with my course mate / project partner, Maddie. But I felt like there was a place where the boy testosterone / excessive horniness excuses stop. I expected that when we're married, you find a way to cut back on those things that put you in a position to want to cheat on your wife. But that was not the case for my husband, Greg. After cheating twice, once when we were in college and the other a few years into our wedding, he decided to give unfaithfulness one more go. And of all the girls in the world he could cheat with, he chose my sister, who he was almost 10 years older than, by the way. I've been stupid for so long, listening to his excuses and playing the understanding girlfriend and wife, but no more. I took my kid and raided his cash stash of over 170 grand. But before we proceed, let's go back to the dreadful day when I met Greg. The second semester of my first year in college was a bad year for everyone in my class. We had a classmate that died. It was self-inflicted due to depression. It's true when people say that when someone does that to try to escape the pain never truly goes away. It just gets passed to other people. I was one of those other people. I was never really close with the guy, let's call him Jacob, but we talked a few times. Whenever we sat together for a lecture, he never had any good things to say on virtually any topic. We could all be talking about relationships, and when it was Jake's turn to speak, he would go on a dark rant about how painful and heart-wrenching relationships are, inadvertently bumming us all out. I started to avoid him because of this. Most of us did. We never truly tried to appreciate how much he was suffering until it was too late. When we got the news, I felt sick immediately. I blamed myself. Anyways, after a few weeks of not leaving the couch, my roommate Fred decided that we needed to go to an actual party to get me out of my pity party. He wanted to go to a rave, but I wasn't into it, so we settled on getting drinks at a bar with some friends. When we got to the bar, I listened to one of my friends, Jean, go on and on about her new boyfriend. And after a few minutes, the waiter brought me a martini. I quickly told him I didn't order it, but he told me that it was from one of the guys at the bar. I looked around, and there I saw him, Greg with some guys. He waved at me and I waved back. I rarely drank because I was a lightweight, so I'd promised myself that I was only going to drink club soda that evening. Before I could decide what to do with the drink, Jean slid it over to her side and drank it. We kept talking for a few moments before Fred alerted me that he was coming over. I turned to him and he said hi and introduced himself. He asked me if we could talk for a moment. I wanted to say no because I'd already surpassed my energy limit when I decided to go to the bar with Fred. Before I could answer him, Fred spoke up on my behalf. He said yes, that I would very much like to talk to him. I decided to just go with it and hear what he had to say. We talked for a little while at the bar, and within those few minutes, he proved himself to be a really interesting guy. He was somebody that I'd like to see again, but when he asked me if I'd go out with him, I said no. I told him I was busy with stuff and figuring things out and I couldn't be in a relationship then. He said okay, and gave me his number in case I changed my mind. I was sure I wouldn't, but I collected it anyway. The next few days, I'd totally forgotten all about Greg. I went to class, which was the first time I had in some time. We had a test, so I had to show up. When we were done, I stepped out of the hall and headed home. As I was walking across the lawn, I heard someone yell my name from behind me. I turned around, and to my surprise, it was Greg. He walked up and said hi, and we talked for a while. The next time I checked my watch, an hour had passed. And I told him I'd had to go. He said okay and told us to continue our conversation over dinner. That was the second time he was asking me out, so I decided to say yes. He was sweet, smart, and funny. What could go wrong, right? Well, we went out together once, then again and again, and 1 month later, we were dating. Every one of my friends liked him. He was more outgoing than I was, and they all had fun with him whenever he was around. Greg played basketball on the school team, and because of that, he was kind of popular, which didn't sit well with me. I didn't want to be one of those girls associated with jocks, but Greg assured me that it wasn't a problem, and that if I wanted to keep our relationship private, it was fine. Back then, I thought that this was him being the sweetest guy on earth, but I didn't realize that it was all a ploy to cheat on me. Girls tend to ask fewer questions when they can't associate you with an actual girlfriend. I learned this the hard way. A few weeks into the start of our second year, my class was put in groups for a project, and I was paired up with a girl named Maddie. We met up at a coffee shop to discuss our plans for the project, and when Greg came to pick me up, he met Maddie. I introduced Greg to Maddie as my friend, because as we've discussed before, we were keeping our relationship private from anyone who wasn't close to us. I went to the restroom for a minute, and before I came back, Maddie and Greg had already exchanged numbers. I didn't know this at the time, of course. A little over 2 weeks later, I was supposed to go to classes, but it was my time of the month, and I was feeling like crap. I was on the road already, and I didn't want to return home because Greg's place was closer. I went into his house, and to my shock, Maddie was there, and she wasn't clothed. They both weren't. I've never been so shocked and confused in my life. Till that day, I never even had the slightest idea that maybe Greg was cheating on me. He'd always been so sweet, so attentive. He'd been the perfect boyfriend. Of course, I should have known that they don't exist. I walked out of the house without giving him a moment to explain. Maddie also looked as confused as I did, but I didn't even bother to talk to her. It was my fault anyways. She didn't know he was my boyfriend. Greg tried calling and sending texts, but I didn't reply to any of them. I just stayed in my room. He even tried coming to my apartment, but I told Fred not to let him in. A few days went on like this, and the next time I saw Maddie in class, she promptly apologized. She told me that she had no idea that we were together, and when she asked Greg, he also said that we were just friends and nothing more. I told her that it was fine since she didn't know, but I still didn't talk to Greg for another few weeks. In my mind, I had decided that we were over, but that was far from the truth. Exactly 3 weeks after the incidents, Greg still hadn't stopped calling, texting, and sending me gifts. He even kicked it up a notch by coming to camp out by my apartment doorstep. On one particularly cold night, I decided to let him in so I wouldn't be the reason why he froze to death. We talked that night, and he told me that Maddie didn't mean anything to him. He was in that mood and she was available, and it happened. I didn't want to listen to him at first, until he started to blame me for not being attentive to his needs and how I was always so distant. there was some truth to what he said because that semester had been particularly tough and I had to double up on my studies. He promised not to repeat the same mistake, and I forgave him. Nothing like that ever happened again during our time in college, although now I suspect that he just found a way to hide his vices. After our time in college, we moved in together immediately, and we both started working on our careers. I got pregnant a few years later, and I had to take time off work to give birth. After that, I stayed home longer to take care of the baby, and soon enough, it didn't make sense to return to work. Because Greg was earning enough for the family, we got married a few months after the baby was born, and we moved to another city as Greg's job demanded. When our baby girl, Keith, turned 5, I decided to make something of my career. I'd been a stay-at-home mom for too long. Greg agreed with this, and we decided to hire a babysitter. We hired a young woman, Jocelyn, and she picked up Keith from school every day and stayed with her till Greg and I got back from work. She was a really beautiful girl, and I would have been wary if I'd thought that Greg was still a stinking cheater when he was in college. Besides, whenever she was around, Greg always greeted her formally, and their exchanges were always less than 2 minutes. So imagine my surprise when I came home in the afternoon, a few hours earlier than I was supposed to, because one of the executives in the firm had an issue with the police. I walked into my bedroom, hoping to get some rest before going to cook Greg dinner. He must be very hungry when he came back from work, I thought. But no, he didn't look very hungry in the position I found him in when I opened the door. I fired the maid, we argued and yelled, and he apologized once again, blaming his masculine urges once again. He also blamed me, saying it was my fault for hiring a babysitter because I was dangling a pretty girl in front of him and he took the bait. I took Keith, and we both slept at a motel for a few days before coming back home. I decided to quit my job and become a stay-at-home mom. You wouldn't have any other excuse, right? Lol. Another year after the babysitter incident, my sister Louise came to visit. She had just broken up with her boyfriend who she'd been living with, and she needed a place to stay till she could get back on her feet. Louise was a mess this period because she'd been with her boyfriend since high school. They had just finished college, and she thought they were going to build a life together. It didn't work out. Anyways, I felt safe having Louise in the house because she was my sister. There was no way Greg was going to make a move on her. At least that was what I thought. As I've said before, Greg was loving, caring, and attentive. That was how he won me over in college, and that was the same way he won Louise over. I had gone to get some groceries that fateful day, and when I came back, I knew something was wrong. Keith was by herself in the living room, and there was no sign of Greg or Louise. I checked the bedroom, and there they were, kissing passionately. There was no mistaking it. They were about to get together. Greg jumped off the bed as soon as he saw me and did what he did best. He begged and pleaded, counting all the reasons why it wasn't his fault, while Louise just sat there crying. I thought I knew pain when I caught him cheating the first time, or the second time. I thought I couldn't be moved anymore by his promiscuity, but that was a lie. I locked myself in the bathroom for over 30 minutes crying, and when I was done, I knew what I was going to do. That night, I gave Louise some money to get a motel while I slept in the guest room. The next day, Greg apologized once again before going to work, and even though I didn't say anything, he had believed that I was going to get over it like the last 2 times. But that wasn't going to happen. A few hours after he left for work, I went to his stash, which was a loose floorboard in his closet. He kept all his valuable things there because he thought that having a safe would be too obvious if we ever got robbed. I grabbed all the money in the safe, which totaled $178,000. Then I grabbed all my stuff before going over to Keith's school to pick her up. Then I left for another city. When I safely settled, I called my lawyer and filed for a divorce. It was quick and quiet because Greg didn't want anyone to know that he cheated with my sister. He gave up the house, which I sold off because I didn't want to have any memory of him. He didn't even mention the money in court because he knew that if he did, I would have gone the extra mile to let everybody know what a cheating jerk he really was. I still don't speak to my sister. But I guess in time I'll learn to forgive her. Or not. Let's see how it goes. I mean, no offense, but based off of OP's track record, it seems like it's almost inevitable at some point they're gonna forgive their sister and start talking to them again. If you were in a committed marriage and your own sibling ends up sleeping with your spouse, would you ever be able to forgive your sibling again? Would you ever be able to go back to having a sibling relationship with them? I'd like to know what you guys think. I got my baby daddy fired from his job. My son's dad is a complete jerk. When I decided to get back at him, I decided to be a complete jerk too. The first time I got pregnant by my baby daddy was just after high school. My mom was disappointed in me. I was her only child and she had high hopes for me. I wasn't going to go to college, but I was going to join her in managing the store she owned in town. When I realized that I'd missed my period and was probably pregnant, I went to my mom's store to inform her about what had happened. My mom had always encouraged me to tell her anything, no matter how bad it was or how bad I messed up. "I think I might be pregnant," I said to her. She stared at me for a while, sighed, and looked away. I kept asking if she heard me, but she didn't respond. At some point, I genuinely got scared that I'd taken away my mom's ability to speak. She didn't even look at me. She just looked sideways until I left the store. Frustrated and in tears, I walked out of her store. Her staff who was at the counter asked if I was okay. I nodded and managed to fake a smile. I was going to go home, but I needed someone to talk to, so I went to my baby daddy's house instead. He lived in a tiny home with his mother and brothers. My baby daddy grew up very poor. His mother was a single mom who struggled to take care of her 4 sons. His father was a total bum. He only ever returned home to impregnate his wife. As soon as she got pregnant, he would take off, abandoning them for months and sometimes even a year. My mom had warned me to stay away from him. She didn't approve of our relationship. "I don't know, honey. Men tend to end up just like their fathers," my mom had said, characteristically rubbing my arms. She rubbed them whenever she expressed her concerns about something. I was slightly annoyed. "Mom, it's unfair that you don't want me seeing someone just because his dad is bad. It's not his fault that his dad is irresponsible." My mom sighed and assured me that she was only simply looking out for me. "I just want you to be happy," she said and shrugged. "I'm happy with him, Ma, I promise." I rolled my eyes when my mom left the room. I was just 15, and my mom was expressing her fears about a man being irresponsible. It wasn't like we were going to have a baby or something, I thought. As I walked closer to my baby daddy's house, I saw his car parked just in front of the building. I walked faster when I saw that the car's engine was on and he was about to drive off. His uncle had gifted him his very old car on his birthday, and my baby daddy had been very excited. His mom could only afford a rusty old car that he and his brothers took turns driving. I called out to him, and as I moved closer, I noticed he wasn't alone in the car. He had company, and it was a girl from school. As soon as he saw me, he drove off. I was so naive at the time, or I was just too preoccupied with my problems. I had no idea what happened. I returned home feeling very dejected. My baby daddy came to mind that night and apologized for driving off. I had thought that he didn't see me or that there was an emergency. He lied about the girl needing to take the girl to a clinic. I didn't bother asking him why he had to take her. I didn't even know that they were friends or spoke to each other. I told him what had happened with my mom. I was 17 at the time, and when I told him that I'd missed my period, he assured me that we would take care of our child together. He had even promised to get a job at his uncle's food shop. He also looked a bit excited about being a father and kissed me on my cheeks. "How did it go?" he asked, referring to my conversation with my mom. "She was so mad she refused to speak to me," I replied to him. He said, "Why?" I looked at him, wondering why he would ask that question. Was he asking why my mom was mad at me? Before I could respond to that, my mom's car pulled up to our house. I wanted my baby daddy and me to talk to my mom together, to know what we would do about what I just found out. I turned to him to talk, but he wasn't there. My baby daddy jumped through the back fence as soon as he saw my mom. My mom was pissed, but she promised to stand by and support me regardless of the decision I took. She advised me though to end the pregnancy. I didn't agree because I was crazily in love with my baby daddy at the time. I wanted him to stay with me, and I wanted something bigger than the love we shared to make us connected. I wanted to carry and birth this child. I told my mom I was going to keep it. She said that was okay and agreed to help me in whatever way she could. During the first 3 months of my pregnancy, everyone told me about my baby daddy going out with the girl I saw in his car. I didn't pay attention to it because I was too busy dealing with the different symptoms that came with pregnancy. I was also co-managing my mom's store so I could make some money to care for my baby. One evening, I decided to go to the park and just read a book by myself. I was really tired and needed to de-stress. That evening, I saw my baby daddy and the girl from school sitting on a wooden bench in the park and kissing. I was livid. I walked up to them and tried to hit her. My baby daddy held my hands and pulled me away from the park. If I could go back to that day, I would hit him instead. He apologized over and over again, but I could not get over it. There were times when I suspected that my baby daddy wasn't really into me. Many times. He was nonchalant about taking me out even on the cheapest dates, spending time with me, and sometimes even being physically intimate. However, I never even had cause to think that it was because he was seeing some other girl. Even when I saw him drive off with her in the car, I didn't think too much of it. I just assumed they were friends. I also ignored the rumors and people telling me that they saw my baby daddy with her. I cried so much that night. I was battling pregnancy symptoms and could hardly catch a break, but my baby daddy was busy locking lips with some other girls at the park. What I saw wrecked me so emotionally that I fell ill. I couldn't tell my mother what had happened because I was worried that she would say she told me so and that she would be right to say that too. So I kept it to myself while refusing to respond to my baby daddy's 100 texts. One day, after a night of crying and worrying, I woke up in the morning and saw that I was bleeding heavily. I had a miscarriage. While I suspect my mom was relieved that I no longer had to deal with being a teenage mom, I wasn't relieved at all. I felt terrible about it. It meant that I no longer had a tie to my baby daddy, and that if I stayed with him, I'd look like a fool. I did break up with him, but I didn't want to. I was young and in love with him. When I was 19, we got back together. This time I was making some money working at my mom's store and he had no job. He still lived with his mom and she took care of him and his older brother. He never wanted to do anything. He wasn't serious about getting a job or starting a business. I would give him money from my savings to do stuff all the time. Sometimes he'd get into arguments with his mom and she'd lock up the fridge. I'd have to pay for his food and other stuff until she moves on from their argument. He was a bum, but I didn't care. He was all I'd ever known, and since my mom was the breadwinner of our little family, I didn't think it was wrong to provide for my man. I got pregnant again when I was 21. This time, I was happier with what had happened because I could take care of my baby and I had more resources. My mom was still not happy about it. She wished I waited until I was married and didn't like my boyfriend anyway. She had tried many times to get me to break up with him. I had our baby and my baby daddy kept being grossly irresponsible, especially financially. I had to take care of our child and him. It became frustrating because the responsibilities were too much for me. I tried to convince him many times to take a job, and he would, but then again, he would get fired. When our child was 3, his mother died and that was all the reset that he needed. There was no one to provide for him again and no one to take care of the rent. His brother moved out of the neighborhood to search for a job in a better part of the state, and he moved in with my mom and me. My mom was of course not comfortable with the situation, but she would do anything for me. So my baby daddy lived with my mom and her boyfriend. My baby daddy's uncle has always had a soft spot for him. Their dad left them, but his brother was the father figure of sorts that they had. After high school, his uncle tried to get him several jobs, but that failed because my baby daddy would sabotage the job. His uncle decided that he was done with him and cut him off. Since my baby daddy's mom died, he tried to contact his uncle, but his uncle wasn't going to help out. I knew something had changed. He wanted to be responsible, get a job, and rent his own place. I knew he was serious when he started sending out applications and asked for my help to get a CV together. My baby daddy reached out to his uncle again, and his uncle agreed to help him one more time, but he made it clear that it was the last time he would help him, and that if he sabotaged that job, he would never help him again. His uncle soon got him a job as a truck driver for a delivery company. He had to be up by 9 every day, head over to the company to get the supplies, and deliver them. 2 weeks into this job, he was still not contributing to the financial needs of the house. He never had money, it was always one excuse or the other. One evening, I was cleaning our room when I found a nice pair of heels in his side of the wardrobe. Since I had our baby, my shoe size increased, so that was not my shoe size. Even when I hadn't given birth, I wore shoes 2 sizes bigger. I just knew he had gotten the shoes for some other woman. I was annoyed. I was the one who had stood with him all through the time he was jobless and had nothing going on for him. He made some money and the first gift he'd get was for another woman? I was livid. When he returned from work, I confronted him and showed him the shoes. Surprisingly, he admitted that it was for the same woman I'd seen in his car, the one he cheated with. I was pissed, and he didn't even pay any attention to me. I yelled and yelled, but he ignored me. Listen, if you want me out of your house, that's fine. I can pay my rent now anyway. I was shocked. Had he been using me all along? I went out of the house for a walk and left my son with my mom's boyfriend. I had looked forward to my baby daddy finally contributing to the financial needs of our family, but he got a job and chose to buy some woman a nice pair of shoes instead. I was going to get back at him, and I knew just how to do that. My mom and I leave for the store very early every morning. Her boyfriend would drop us off in his car and then go on to his job. The next morning, I asked my mom to take my son along with her to the store, and she obliged me. When everyone had left, my baby daddy started to get dressed for work as usual. I went into our room while he was in the bathroom, picked up his keys, and left the house. I got into his truck and drove away. His job was very particular about time. He had to be at work at exactly 9 to pick up the supplies and have them delivered. He was still in the trial period of his job, so I knew that would get him sacked. His uncle would also not come to his rescue since he'd warned him to not mess up at his new job. I also slid out with his phone, so there was no way he could reach out to anyone. I drove the truck all around town crying. I felt very hurt. My mom had a better relationship than me. Her boyfriend earned less than she did, but he pulled his weight around the house and he would never cheat on her. Just as I planned it, my baby daddy was fired. I also told him to leave my house. He went to live with a girl from high school, but I heard she threw him out because he slept with her roommate. This guy sounds like a real winner. I just feel bad that OP was so head over heels for somebody that was honestly just all along so awful to OP. Our next story is, my foster parents get what they deserve. My first time at theater, I fell in love. It was one of those life-defining moments where you wonder where you just know that that's what you want to do. I spent half the time reconsidering all I knew about life. The other half of my time was spent absolutely appreciating the play I was watching. As I left the theater that evening, my mind was made up. I would bring people the same joy and sensations that I had myself experienced that day. I also said a silent prayer for Tony. It was he, after all, who had given me the ticket to attend the play. Before I get too far ahead of myself, though, I should probably tell you who I am. The thing about telling you about myself is that I can't do that without telling you about a few other people, so let's get right into it. Patricia and Andre were my parents. I said were because they're quite obviously dead. Yeah, it sucks. I was just 3 when the car they were driving was rammed into by a semi-truck with an inebriated driver at the wheel. At the time, I was with my grandmother Grace. I barely remember anything about my parents. I learned more about them from photos and videos than from any memory whatsoever. For the next few years after my parents passed, I lived with my grandma Grace. Unfortunately, she too passed and there was no available adult to take care of me, or at least no one that the government trusted, so I got put into the system. I was quite troublesome and, in retrospect, I probably should have seen a professional, or anyone, to talk about the trauma I was dealing with. Unfortunately, I didn't, and I instead got passed from foster home to foster home. Now, I'm not going to be dishonest and say that the foster homes I was in were absolute heck holes run by people who were more interested in the check the government gave them for having to take care of people like me. Well, some of them were exactly that, but not all of them. However, like I said before, I was quite troublesome and I kept running away, getting into fights. And in one instance, I may have given my foster parents nuts that they were very allergic to. Eventually, I landed in my current foster home with the Madisons. Remember how I said that not every foster home was only interested in the government check and not their foster children? Yeah, the Madisons were not in that category at all. In fact, I would say that of all the foster homes I'd been in, this was the absolute worst. Normally, I'd be the usual thorn in the side of my foster parents, but I was getting older. The government was getting tired of having to pay my bills, and the last thing I wanted was further institutionalization in a place like prison, or God forbid, mandatory military service. With that in mind, I had to get mellow. Of course, I still had a little bit of fun and shenanigans here and there, but nothing too serious. The Madisons also had 3 more foster children: Toby, Debbie, and Charlotte. I guess the more foster children you have, the more money you get. It didn't matter to us really, because we couldn't even really feel like the government was spending a dime on us. Charlotte once joked that we were basically homeless people who just happened to live under a roof. She wasn't wrong. Every way that the Madisons would cut corners, they did. Food was cheap and mostly not at all nutritious. We basically had to work to save up money for our own clothes, and they even went as far as turning down the heat even on the coldest winter days. We all wanted to leave as fast as we possibly could, but honestly, we didn't know what to be scared of more: our awful foster parents or the cruel world. Now, Debbie and Toby were lucky. They're involved in sports and are very skilled. In fact, scouts had already been in contact with Toby, who was the oldest of us all, telling him they were interested in having him come to their college under a sports scholarship. I guess football was his way out. Debbie, young as she was, could impress Michael Phelps and Katie Ledecky. As if that wasn't enough, she was also really smart. I'm talking absolute genius. She too was almost certainly going to get a scholarship to college. Charlotte and I, who were the same age, were quite similar in the sense that we were both troublesome children whose time with the Madisons was their last chance. We also didn't have much of a plan on what to do once we became 18. So time was ticking for us, and uncertainty loomed. The more I thought about it, the more it scared me. One thing was certain though, I had to have a plan soon. During the summer vacation right before 11th grade, I decided to earn some money working at a little pizza place downtown. That way I could have enough money to get some new things for myself. At first, I had to take the bus every day to and from work. This wasn't exactly the best experience, as the bus always had this funky smell. And I still had to walk to the bus station, which was quite a walk to make. And I usually ended up slightly late for work most days. However, one day on my way to work, a kind-faced man with salt and pepper hair slowed his car down beside me and asked if I wanted a ride. I recognized him as the widower who lived down the street. I never really talked to him before, but he seemed nice enough. I got into his car and thanked him. That is how I met Tony. He said that he noticed me going out most days and he'd also seen me downtown, so he figured I must have a summer job. He then asked where I worked, and I told him. He told me that wasn't far off from where he worked teaching art, so he offered to drop me off. I was really grateful for the free transport and the convenience. When I was done with my shift for the day, I was shocked to see Tony waiting for me in the parking lot. On the drive back home, he offered me a book. He said he believed I was a bright mind, and he wanted to know what I thought of the book. I thanked him for the book and the ride when he dropped me off, and I promised to get started reading it. And so Tony and I became friends. A routine developed between us. He would pick me up on his way to work and bring me back on his way home. At least most days it was like that. Tony was one of the nicest people I'd ever met. He was patient and considerate. He always asked for my opinions on a wide variety of social issues and seemed quite pleased when I started reading more books. I spoke with him about my life and all the experiences I had had. He was of course sympathetic, but he also believed that I was capable of becoming anything and being a valuable member of society. He pushed me to take an interest in many things, and though most times I ended up getting bored of them pretty easily, I tried. So when one day he gave me a ticket to see a play at the theater, I thanked him and I took it. That decision changed my life forever. When I got home from the play, I told Charlotte about my plans to become an actor. If there was one thing I could rely on Charlotte for, it was support. So together we discussed my chances and what it would entail to have my dreams come true. First, I had to graduate high school. That might seem obvious to you, but I'd previously been considering dropping it. I also had to apply to art universities. The top school we considered was the Juilliard School in New York. I also decided to join my school's drama club. Better late than never, right? All I did was directed towards the goal of becoming an actor. It felt really refreshing to have a direction I wanted my life to follow, and I, along with my foster sibling and Tony, were really excited about it all. And then I hit a brick wall. My foster parents, Bella Madison, my foster mother, had decided that it wasn't enough to almost starve and be mean to me. She decided that it was foolish of me to have a dream and that she was going to crush that dream. At first, it was just jokes about me being silly with her husband, and then it turned to her having a talk with me to ask if I was really serious. When it became clear that I was serious and I wanted to pursue my dream, she finally decided to go on the offensive. Toby told me that she had once tried to become an actress, and it didn't really work out for her. He knew why she was being so annoying about me wanting to go into the theater arts. Honestly, that made no sense to me at all. I mean, it's bad enough that you're horrible to us and you rarely ever make any sort of positive input to our lives, but to actually decide that you'd be a stumbling block? That was just pure evil. I tried to convince myself that there was no way she'd actually do anything serious, but boy did she shock me. First, she raided my room, well, the room I share with Toby, for anything related to theater she saw. I'd gotten a few books on some theory and the history of theater, and she took them. At first, I thought she had just seized them and she'd return them, or I'd at least managed to get them from wherever she hid them, but she went as far as to burn them, and she has the guts to call me to watch them burn. For days after, I wasn't well. I was so upset I cried constantly. Those books weren't cheap, and I'd used the money I saved from work to buy them. Eventually, Charlotte and Debbie spoke to Tony about what my foster mom had done when he kept asking what was up with me and why he hadn't seen me in a while. When I finally recovered enough to be able to attend school again, Tony, who had been taking on the responsibility of driving my foster siblings and I to school, handed me a wrapped present. He called it an early birthday present. The present contained books, the very ones I'd watched burn a few days before, and couple I had plans to get. The final straw for my foster mom was when she came to my school to request that I be removed from the drama club, as it was affecting my responsibilities at home. When the principal called me to let me know that I had to withdraw from the drama club, she was there. I begged and I pleaded for her to not take this one thing away from me. Her response? A smug smile. While I cried and pleaded, she ignored me and said her decision was final. Eventually, she left me there in the principal's office, bawling my eyes out. On the way home, I told Charlotte what had happened and how upset I was about it. At first, I had the idea to run away from home, but then Charlotte looked me in the eyes and told me no. No, I was not going to cower in fear or be forced to give up my dream because someone was jealous that I'd be successful at something she failed at. She suggested I strike hard. The rest of the way home, we planned on a way to deal with the Madisons. We decided a surefire way to get the Madisons in trouble, and possibly to have us rid of them permanently, was to get them in legal trouble. Toby and Debbie were surprisingly also in agreement. When we told them our plan, I swear I'd never seen Toby look so pleased. He even offered to do the hard part. Our plan was basically to get our foster parents arrested for possession of drugs. Toby said he'd get the drugs. I guess his popularity in school must have given him connections to dealers or something. Within a week, he'd gotten them. He got a healthy amount too. It must have cost him a lot. That's how much he hated the Madisons and wanted them gone. The next part of the plan involved planting the drugs around the house and spiking our foster parents' meal with a couple of them, mostly marijuana and crushed mushrooms. Then, when we were satisfied that there would be a ton of things for the police to find, Debbie called 911, crying and saying that her foster parents were high and threatening her. Police got dispatched to the house, and after a quick drug test, our foster parents were arrested. The police officers also searched the house and discovered stashes of the drugs that we had planted. Criminal charges for child endangerment and use of illegal drugs were brought against them. Then came the part that we knew was going to happen. CPS came over, and we knew that we were possibly going to get split up and sent to different homes. We had planned for it, and we intended to keep in touch no matter what happened. Just as we had accepted our fates, Tony came to the rescue. Apparently, he had applied to become a foster parent to the 4 of us. It took a lot of effort, but somehow he pulled it off. And now we live with him. I got back in the drama club. Toby graduated and plays college football for USC. Debbie's killing it with swimming. Charlotte finally found something she loves, chess, and she's very good at it. I'm getting my application to the Juilliard School ready. With any luck, I'll get in. The last I heard of the Madisons, they were convicted of the crimes and were sentenced to prison. Would it be harsh to say that they got what they deserved? Because I think so. At least now they won't stand in the way of me pursuing what I love. Not only did they stand in the way of OP pursuing what OP loved, they used these kids as cheapo assets to milk the government for money. They honestly 100% deserve to get a sentence. At least they do in my opinion, wouldn't you guys agree? But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories. I told my boyfriend's wife about our affair. The process of getting revenge on my boyfriend was very easy, and it was mostly because I didn't have to do it myself. Well, technically I did get my revenge, but his wife did all the dirty work. I met my boyfriend when I was 22. I lived with my best friend in the house she inherited from her late mother and worked as a waitress at the local diner. My boyfriend was the financial advisor to the restaurant's owner. He came around frequently with his wife. They even had a special table. I always thought he was handsome. He had such healthy hair. His eyes were dreamy and his lips were so perfectly formed. Whenever he came by the restaurant alone, our eyes would meet and I'd look away quickly. I had a crush on him and all the girls at work knew that. My friend and I waited at the restaurant, but we were always on separate shifts. Our manager insisted that we had to be on separate shifts if we wanted to keep working in the restaurant. We already had a reputation for starting trouble whenever we were both on the same shifts. That worked for my friend and me anyway. We had a dog and we wouldn't have to beg our neighbors to help watch her while we were out together working. My friend was the only person I admitted to that I had a crush on my boyfriend. The other girls at work knew I admired him and all, but they didn't think it was serious. I didn't think it was serious too, until I started looking forward to him coming to the restaurant. I would even go as far as begging my coworkers to let me wait at his table. His wife was a plain-looking woman, beautiful but always plainly dressed. She hardly wore any makeup too, but her skin shone. It was clear that she came from a wealthy family. One afternoon, I was at the bank settling some issues when I looked to my right and saw him. He flashed me a smile and I smiled back and looked away quickly. Was he flirting with me? I wondered. It wasn't the first time we had exchanged smiles or flirty looks. I decided I was going to ask him if he was flirting with me that day. I walked up to him and said hi. "Hello, I know you from the diner," he said. "Yeah, are you flirting with me?" I asked bluntly. He was taken aback, but he soon smiled and regained composure. "Do you want me to flirt with you?" "That is not the question," I said. He said, "Well, I'm asking a new question." "Do you want to?" I asked, flirting back. That day we exchanged phone numbers and started to text each other frequently. He would come over to our house and I would get in his car where we'd talk for hours. My best friend called me aside after one such car rendezvous and asked what was going on. I said nothing, we're just hanging out as friends. I started to walk away, but she stopped me. "You like him?" I said no. She said, "I think you do, young lad." Before my friend's mom passed on, she called me young lad. "Don't do that," I scowled at my friend. They said, "Don't do what?" I said, "Don't use that tone and don't call me young lad." "You like him," she said. "Well, I kinda do, but I've always liked him. You know I had a crush on him." She said, "Yeah, well, it was nice when you had a crush on him from afar. Now you see each other nearly every day." I said, "Would it be so bad if I liked him? What if he likes me too?" She said, "Sweetheart, don't be naive. He's a married man." I was annoyed that my friend would speak to me like that. It was meant for her to imply that I was naive. She had been with a married man in the past, and I never judged her for it. That's bold of you to say considering that you dated a married man and I never judged you for it. She said, yes, I did. That is precisely why I don't want you to make the same mistakes I made. We are just friends, I assured her and left for my room. Spoiler alert, we were not just friends. Yes, at the time we hadn't hooked up, but he had kissed me once in his car just as I was about to return to the house. That day, I had deliberately made my lips very inviting. I used light pink lip gloss and lined my lips well to make them look more plumpy. I knew it worked when his eyes would roam down to my lips. I felt pretty. We never talked about the kiss after that, even though the tension between us was almost palpable. On one of our regular car chats, he asked if I'd be his girlfriend. I was surprised at how direct he was, but I was glad he asked. I had fallen in love with him and assumed that his request meant he had too. I said, what about your wife? He said, what about her? I just want us to be together. I don't care if I have to leave my marriage. I'm in love with you. I said, I don't know. I don't think I could be in a relationship if I don't see a future. He said, we do have a future. I didn't respond to that. The next time we met, he took me on a proper date. We went to a secluded restaurant that was quite far from town. He told me that he and his wife were close to getting a divorce anyway, and were going to make it official soon. She can't have children, he revealed. As much as I loved her and hoped we'd be together for the rest of our lives, I really want to have children. He went on to tell me about how his wife never told him about her infertility issues, even though she had known about it since she was in her early 20s. I felt very sorry for him. That night, I fantasized about us having a child together and how glorious that would be. As if the universe had planned it and wanted us to be together the next morning, he texted me about us having a child together. I excitedly told him that I thought about it the night before too. Our relationship soon got serious. He made me quit my job at the restaurant because he said seeing me at the restaurant while he was there for work made him uncomfortable. I got a job at a large store very close to where my friend and I lived, but I was fired because I kept calling in sick. I called in sick often because the only way I could spend time alone with my boyfriend was during work hours when his wife was away at the office. My best friend never openly judged me, but I knew she had reservations about our relationship. You know, I just don't want you to get hurt like me, my friend would say. I would say, trust me, this relationship is nothing like what you had with that person. He's in love with me and I love him too. I promise you, he's going to leave his wife. These men never leave their wives, my friend would say softly, but I always ignored her. She would see for herself that my man was nothing like the person she used to date. Her ex was a teaching assistant in college and he was newly married. She loved him, but he didn't feel the same way about her. It was as clear as day that he had no intention of keeping her around for a long time. My boyfriend, however, had promised to leave his wife. I didn't even have to make that a requirement. He assured me that he'd leave her and even gave me regular updates on how the update went. I looked forward to being able to go out with him in public without any fear. We couldn't go out together even though he was about to get a divorce because he didn't want his wife to use infidelity against him in court. I got many jobs, but I would usually have to quit because my boyfriend needed us to be together. I had so many questions at the time, like why my boyfriend always had so much time to spend with me during work hours. Rich men were usually very busy. I didn't question him anyway because he had money, that was clear. He drove the nicest cars and wore the most expensive suits and shoes. He could also afford to send me money regularly to make up for the times I stayed off work. I wasn't just having fun with him, I looked forward to us getting married. As time went by, no divorce was happening and I became worried. Was he getting cold feet? I would ask him about the divorce and he'd look away and just change the topic. I thought getting pregnant would help him hasten the process. I got off my birth control pills and got pregnant some months later. When I found out I was pregnant, I became very worried. I wondered if he truly wanted me to be his wife and carry his child. I had heard too many stories of men going back on their promises. When I told my best friend, I didn't tell her that it was deliberate. She advised me to end it immediately and not even tell him. We're still trying to save up and return to school. You can't afford to have a baby right now, she warned. When I told my boyfriend, I expected him to be very excited, but he got really mad at me. Why would you get pregnant? Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? Are you trying to ruin me? I was shocked at his reaction. He was so angry that he left the hotel room in anger. I cried so much that day my eyes hurt. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed that he left a small bag behind. I picked it up and checked it. In the bag was a tiny purple purse that I guess belonged to his wife. Inside the tiny purse was her work ID. I took a picture of the card and took the bag along with me. I guess my boyfriend didn't notice that his bag was missing, but when he did, he called me. "Do you have my bag?" he asked me. "Yes, Before I could say anything, he hung up. Not long after, he came over to my house. I went out to see him with the bag, hoping that he'd apologize, take all he'd said back, and we could move on. He took the bag from me and told me when I was going to end it. And what? I could almost swear that I was dreaming. He was not the man I knew. "You have to end it," he said. "My wife would never forgive me if she finds out I have a love child." What? My lips were trembling. "Did you not say you were getting a divorce? What happened?" I felt stupid saying that. It suddenly reminded me that my situation was not so different from my friends after all. The only difference was that I was carrying his child. He ignored my question and said, "I'll send some money for you to end it," and then drove off. I sat on the front balcony of our house and cried my eyes out. My best friend was upset when I told her. She didn't say, "Oh, I told you so," or anything like that. It's one of the reasons that she's my best friend to this day. She promised that we would deal with him together. Some days later, she came home and informed me that she had found out many things about my boyfriend. Apparently, his wife was the one with the money. Her dad used to be in public office, and she's a rich lawyer. He had no serious job, and the owner of the restaurant I used to work in was probably the only account he managed. His wife's siblings are all lawyers, and he'd get into serious trouble if she found out about his infidelity. And of course, he was never going to divorce her. I didn't tell my best friend what I was going to do, but one afternoon, I called his wife's office. I told her assistant that I had personal matters to discuss with her. She returned my calls later, and I told her what had transpired between her husband and me. She hung up. I called her the day after, but I got no response. Her husband called me, yelling and swearing at me. He then begged me to call his wife and tell her that I was lying and only trying to get back at him for refusing my advances. I refused and told him to go to heck. I called his wife again some days later. "Listen, don't ever call me again," she barked at me. "You did not tell me before having unprotected sex with him, so why do I have to listen to you now? You can have that ungrateful man." I told my best friend that I told his wife, and she assured me that it was enough revenge. If she is as dangerous as the people at work say, she would leave him very miserable. I felt satisfied. It was a relief that I didn't have to do anything. "My wife is leaving me. This is all your fault," my boyfriend cried one day. I had been skeptical about taking his calls, but I just decided to. "She's taken everything," he cried. "Well, they belonged to her anyway. It's only right that she took them." I did not really know how much of a setback I had caused him until I saw him while on a job hunt with my friend. He was applying for the same job I was applying for. When he saw me, he was so embarrassed that he couldn't even stay. He left immediately. My best friend saw him and she mentioned that he didn't even bring a car along with him. We laughed so hard about it and promised to never go out with a married man ever again. I mean, I guess you definitely learned your lesson, but I think most people would agree you don't go out with a married man to begin with. I guess maybe if they're like verifiably separated or something, but even that's probably a little weird, right? Our next story is, I got my best friend expelled after he betrayed me. Daniel and I have been best friends since high school. We were as thick as thieves and as close as brothers. That's why his betrayal came as a shock. That's why they call it a betrayal. It's those close to you, the ones you least expect, to turn on you to end up doing just that. Well, to be fair, there were signs that should have been enough indication that his betrayal was coming, but I guess I was blindsided by years of close friendship and practical brotherhood that preceded the betrayal of my once good friend. Daniel and I first met at Courage High School. He came in as a third-year transfer, literally from the other side of the country. We became best friends almost instantly. We basically liked the same things, so it felt natural. He was a fan and player of soccer that easily made the school team as I did. He also liked movies and females, so more or less a carbon copy of what I was about at that time in my young life. The first time I saw a glimpse of Daniel's treacherous nature was in my senior year of high school, when Daniel broke my leg out of spite and jealousy. In high school, we were both on the soccer team. He was assigned as a defender on the team, while I was an attacking player on the same team. Daniel always wanted to be an attacker, but our no-nonsense coach had other ideas and put him as a defender on the flank. It was a position he despised and never stopped complaining about, but he had no choice. It was either that or the bench, which was the only thing that Daniel despised more than playing the defensive position. "It's unfair, Nate," Daniel would groan. "I deserve to be up front scoring the goals, but that old geezer has me stuck at the back." On days like this, Daniel was irritable and insufferable. Despite this, I always did my best to console him and generally tried to make him see the bright side of his soccer problems. "Hey, at least you made the school team, which is not an easy thing to do, Dan," I would say as consolation in several different ways because the complaints were annoyingly frequent. Of course, the consolation did not help. If anything, it came off a bit awkward for two reasons. First, I knew the coach was right on this one. He had all the skills and energy required to play the position, but sadly lacked enough composure and calm, calculated, on-the-spot thinking required to get the job done. The other reason was that there were people on the team that could play the position better than he ever could, and I was one of those people. It didn't help when I got handpicked as the first-choice striker ahead of Dan, who was once again thrown to the back of the defensive line. I was excited about getting selected, and naturally, I expected my best friend to be happy that his best friend had gotten what he wanted. But Dan was salty about it. He didn't even bother congratulating me on getting picked, which hurt. It wasn't like I didn't understand his feelings about the situation and how he loathed the coach's decision, but there was little I could do about that. Even if I stepped down, he would still not get the position. There was no changing the coach's mind either. My hands were tied in this situation, and I thought Dan would see that or at least let it go, especially since his best friend was involved. I didn't know that Dan had been festering some resentment at my recent promotion to the front of the squad. Of course, I should have known that he wouldn't like anyone that occupied the position he wanted, and I foolishly thought I would be the exception to his scorn and jealousy. But I ended up paying the price for underestimating the limits of his jealousy and what he would do to get even with me for what he must have viewed as a betrayal on my part. A couple of weeks passed, and Daniel looked chill about it as time passed, but I didn't know he was far from chill about it. He patiently awaited an opportunity to execute his plan for me. He got his chance during one of our training sessions. The coach split the team up and then set us to play against each other for training purposes. Dan and I had always been put on opposing sides for this training session. Like most training days, the game was fast-paced and physical as the ball moved around from one part of the field to another. I have to give Dan credit for picking his moment well. I had the ball, but his defensive line was good and he was determined to keep me at bay. I had scored one already, and now they were full on alert and showed no openings while blocking any passing lanes I would have used to link up with my teammates. I decided to try and push through 3 stern-looking men by myself and only succeeded in dribbling past one before the other bullied me off the ball and onto the ground. The coach's whistle didn't go off, neither did I expect it to. The tackle was hard, but legal. I made to get up and get back into the game, even as the ball and the virtual attention of everyone followed the lone ball as the defender cleared it with force to the other side of the field. But before I could get up on my feet from my prone position on the grassy floor, I felt a sharp pain and a sickening crunch from the Achilles of my left foot, which was my power foot. Someone had stepped hard on my heels as I attempted to get up, and once again, I found myself on the floor, this time writhing in pain. The ball had left that half of the pitch, so it took a second or two for anyone to notice I was down. But my shouts and cursing soon resounded over the pitch, and the game was halted as everyone noticed that my injury was serious. Players gathered around me to inspect the damage. In a weird moment of clarity through the pain, I thought I could see Dan with a sly, satisfied smile on his lips as his best friend dealt with what could be a severe injury, and yet he smiled. It was the type of smile a villain would put on when a plan works better than they thought it would and they got away with it. But the moment did not last. I couldn't focus on that as the pain doubled and then tripled. As my teammates tried to carefully move me off the field, the pain came with a blinding white on my vision and then everything went dark. When I came to, I woke up on a bed and my left leg felt heavy. I knew where I was in an instant. The smell of antiseptic and drugs combined with the annoying creaking of a ceiling fan let me know that I was in the school clinic. All school athletes were mandated to report to the clinic periodically to make sure that they were physically fit to participate in their chosen sport. But this wasn't a routine visit to the clinic. There were only two reasons why an athlete would come to the clinic. They were either ill or seriously injured. Since I was not ill, there was only one other possibility. I looked down at my leg to confirm my fears as bitter memories of the circumstances that led me into the clinic bed resurfaced. My left leg, my power foot, was wrapped in a cast, which did not help with the throbbing pain. "Nate, you got a broken leg, but luckily it's a clean break, so it should heal properly with time," said Dr. Smaller, the resident doctor in the school. Dread filled my chest. What of the competition I'd spent countless training hours preparing for? My wish was to get a scholarship into a nice college, and it might never come through. I didn't know if I was brave enough to play sports again after the trauma of that pain. As if he could read my mind, or he just saw my expression and made an easy educated guess, he said, "Your injury is serious. You hurt your Achilles tendon. You'll find it hard to move, let alone play soccer," said Dr. Smaller, his voice tinged with sympathy. "I'm sorry, you won't be able to play in the competition." After that fell news, I was in a state of shock. Some of my teammates came to check up on me, but I didn't notice how they fussed over me. I only wanted to know one thing. Who broke my leg? That was the only question I could ask. They all looked uncomfortable at the question. They didn't know. They assumed I'd gotten the injury from a fall, but I was certain someone had stepped really hard on my left leg intentionally. They thought I was just delirious from the pain, but I knew what I was talking about. They eventually left me to myself after some time. Well, not everyone left. Kurt, the school's second-choice goalkeeper, hung back while the others left. Dr. Smaller was preoccupied in his cubicle office, leaving us basically alone. I was a little surprised. I didn't really know Kurt well. Like most goalkeepers, he was a bit weird, but he was okay. He usually kept to himself and didn't talk much, especially to me. Though the most surprising part of the encounter was what Kurt had to say. "I think I know who caused your injury," Kurt said in a hushed whisper. This held my attention because apart from the fact that I'd been dying to know who cut my dreams short, Kurt had been the opposing goalkeeper in that nightmare training session. He would have had the best view of what happened. "It happened fast, and I only caught a glimpse of it, but I think it was Daniel," said Kurt. I almost lost it right there. Dan was my best friend, and the audacity of this guy to think my best friend would do something spiteful to his best friend was inconceivable to me. "You're crazy," I said with more venom than I intended to. "Dan would never do that to his best friend." Kurt looked hurt that I didn't believe him, and then he just shrugged it off and said something that shook me. "Is it not a bit odd that your best friend hasn't come to visit you?" said Kurt as he made to leave. "But what do I know?" And then he was gone. I stayed on that bed staring at the white walls in silence. Kurt may have left, but his words echoed in my mind. The fact of the matter was that Kurt's accusation made sense. The side of the play where the injury had happened was the position where the coach had placed Dan. Besides, Kurt had no reason to lie to me. He stood nothing to gain and everything to lose because there was a chance that no one would believe him. After all, they all knew that they were best friends. Also, although I didn't want to admit it, Dan had the motive to try and get me out of the position and steal it for himself. The more I thought about it, the guiltier Dan became in my eyes. As soon as Dr. Smaller permitted me to leave with crutches for support, I searched for Dan, who I later found in the dorm rooms just on his way out for lunch. Most of the other students had already made their way to the dining hall, so we basically had it to ourselves. "Why did you break my leg, Dan?" I asked in a cool, matter-of-fact manner that caught my old friend off guard. The lie was written over his face, even as he tried to deny it. But he'd been my friend for a while. I knew that he got careless with information when you pushed his buttons, so I decided to push hard. "You've always wanted my position as the top striker, and the funny thing is, you still won't get it because you're just not good enough." I said that, ensuring I added just enough air of superiority to make him feel like the lesser party. There was an amount of preparation that could have helped me with what came next. Dan flared at my statement. "You were never good enough, but somehow coach still picked you ahead of me because you kiss butt well," Dan said angrily. Seeing my shocked expression only prompted him to continue. "My only regret is that I didn't break both legs," he said. I stood there stunned for a second while I seriously considered whacking my crutches on his head. It wasn't easy resisting that urge, but the saying, "revenge is best served cold," came to mind and calmed me somewhat, at least enough to walk away without saying another word. After that, my mind was fixated on how to get Dan back. The thought consumed me so much that I knew I would have no peace if I didn't get him back. Luckily, I got my chance sooner than I'd expected. It turns out that my prediction that Dan would still not get the top striker spot on the team was almost prophetic. Not only did he not get the spot, but he didn't make the lineup. He barely even made the bench. Dan didn't take this well. The word was that he had stormed out of the training ground. After hearing that news, the screws turned in my head and a solution came to my head. It really shocked me how I could devise a devious plan so fast. My broken leg was undoubtedly an inconvenience, but it paled compared to my thirst for payback. I waited until it was nighttime, then got up and made my way to the sports complex where the coach had his office. I broke the window as quietly as possible and gingerly climbed into a decent-sized room, careful of my bad foot. The office was filled with trophies and medals of different shapes and sizes, but they all had one similarity. They were prestigious awards for the school. But when I was finished with them, let's just say they were a shadow of their former selves. I painted some slur words and some very uncomplimentary comments I could never say in front of my mother. I dumped it all on the floor in what I imagined would be a hasteful exit. Last, I dropped his phone carelessly and threw some trophy debris hard on Dan's phone that I'd gotten when I made a detour through his dormitory, where he and 5 of his other roommates had slept soundly and loudly. Swiping the phone from his side where he'd slept off, watching something no boy under 18 was meant to watch, was a piece of cake. I think the phone screen might have cracked, but he couldn't care less. Once they found the phone, they would retrieve it and trace it back to the owner, who had definitely left it behind after rampaging in the office of a respected school staff. I made a detour to the locker room, where I located Dan's locker, opened it up, and dropped all my instruments of vandalism into the locker. He should have used a different combination after getting on my bad side. I walked out casually as my gait would allow and no fear of guards. The school was understaffed, and the few guards on school grounds were mostly stationed around the bursary, pantry, and the clinic to stop thieving intruders and students in search of money, food, and drugs. I made it back to the hostel and prayed that my evil plan would work by morning. To my surprise, it worked pretty well. During English class, the vice principal and a very angry coach stormed into the class. The coach pointed to Dan, and then the vice principal summoned him. Dan was bewildered but complied. I instantly knew why they called Dan out of class. A wave of satisfaction washed over me, and some of it must have shown on my face even as Dan and I locked eyes just before he was ushered out. He would understand why I smiled once he got to the principal's office. Dan was expelled for vandalizing the coach's office after evidence was found that he had indeed been involved. The principal announced that it was a petty act instigated by a falling out between Dan and the coach. I hope Dan knew I got him expelled from the school. Finding a new school would not be easy, and even if he got in, his record would keep him off any school team. Did I feel sorry? Not in the slightest. He had it coming. I respect it. That's a pretty crazy level of revenge to go to, but fittingly it is here in Nuclear Revenge. Do you guys think OP went a little too far, or do you think it was warranted? I'd like to know what you guys think, but with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy Nuclear Revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.